Good afternoon. This meeting of the Arizona Independent Redistricting Commission will now come to order. Today is Friday, September 2nd. The time is 1:32 p.m. Let's all start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. We'll go ahead and start with roll call. Vice Chair Freeman.
Here.
Vice Chair Herrera.
Here.
Commissioner McNulty. Here. Commissioner Sturts.
Here.
We have a quorum. I'll go ahead and introduce the other folks around the room. We have our legal counsel today, Joe Canefield and Mary O'Grady, our mapping consultant, Willie Desmond, Stu Robinson, our public information officer, Buck Forst is our chief technology officer, our Executive Director Ray Bladine is in the room, as is Deputy Executive Director Christina Gomez. We have a court reporter today, Marty Herder, recording everything. So when it comes time for public comment, please be sure to come up to the microphone and speak directly into it, and be sure to spell your name for the record so we have an accurate accounting. That takes us to item 2, which is map presentations. And we have one today called Pinal County Governmental Alliance Map Presentation. And then if there are any public proposals, we'll hear from those too.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. I'm Bob Lynch. I'm an attorney here in Phoenix, and I represent the Pinal County Governmental Alliance. You have in front of you a packet that we have prepared that has a series of maps and statistics. I think we will start, if we can, with the congressional map, which your Map Whiz has managed to put up on the screen. When we started constructing this, and this is unfortunately my 4th redistricting, we started from the proposition that the controlling activity would be the Voting Rights Act and federal Justice Department approval under Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act of your decision. And our charge from our client, which is a nonprofit association of the local governments in Pinal County, was to try to keep Pinal County whole. So the first thing I did was tell them I couldn't do it, that there were 3 parts or all of 3 Indian communities in the county that would be divided if we did that, and that wasn't going to work. So we would do our best, and what you see in front of you is the best we could come up with. What this map does is it starts with Section 2 requirements of the Voting Rights Act, majority-minority districts, Districts 4 and 7 as currently denominated. And we started with the current statistics, and we knew from 2001 that CD4 had a 51.8% Hispanic voting age population. This map raises that to 57%. We did that because we know that in our configuration of District 4, there are 478,000 approximately total voting age population, but only 228,000 of them are registered to vote. And therefore, we were taking into account the actual voting age impact of Hispanics, not the population. And we feel that the Justice Department is likely to trend in that direction also. We did the same for District 7. In 2001, it was 44.47% Hispanic voting age population. This map configures District 7 to be 54% Hispanic voting age population. There are somewhat over 505,000 voting age population in District 7, as we've drawn it, but only 275,000 are registered to vote. So again, erring on the side of caution that we were creating or maintaining this Hispanic voting strength, we came up with these two districts as you see them. I want to point out to you, if I can make this thing work, technology is not my long suit, that this line, we did not disturb the line between District 8 and District 7 as it runs through Tucson. We left that alone. By doing that, in order to keep the Hispanic voting population up in 7, we were forced to take this little piece out of Cochise County and to take a piece of Pinal County out here, the Saddlebrook area. That left the bulk of District 8 exactly as it is today, and it needed to slightly reduce population. So by starting with 7 and 4, because we felt you had to start there, we ended up with a position where you keep 8 virtually the same as it is, and we allow as much of Pinal County as possible, minus the Tohono O'odham here, and the Gila River and Ak-Chin here, which are currently in District 7, to remain in District 7. That allows us then to create an eastern Arizona, if you will, rural congressional district, and to have a western Arizona rural congressional district. Our population figures are pretty close. I know that your map people will try to get down to the exact absolute number, or within 1 or 2, 3 or 4 of our districts, and it's reflected in our statistics, are off a little, 15, 17, one of them 29 people out of, but close, and your map can adjust, and your map expert can obviously adjust lines to smooth out those little differences. In District 8, for instance, we are 2 people off. In District 7, we are right on. In District 1, as we have drawn it, we are 17 people short. Again, minor details. In terms of compactness and contiguity, we think we've done a pretty decent job. If you're going to have rural representation in Arizona, excuse me, with these, with the population shifts that have occurred over the last 10 years, we could not figure out a way to keep a rural district the size of the state of Illinois. It just didn't work. And so 2 rural districts seem to be the best way to go. You'll note that we have kept the Hopis separate from the Navajos, as is currently the case. I know that that's a matter for discussion, and there may be some opinions given to you during this process that are different than that. But this is, we started with what we thought would be the end result. And to the best of my knowledge, the Hopis have not yet definitively told you what they want. But I presume that they will sometime during this process. If they were to decide that they would prefer to be with Navajo, the Navajo Nation, there are minor adjustments that we have studied already that can be made up here that accommodate that and keep the general configuration. We also want to point out that we have split Yuma County in ways we've seen others split it as well. We've seen one Hispanic map a Hispanic coalition map of 7 and 4 that does pretty much the same thing. And I think one of your experimental maps about how many border districts you could have more or less followed that same configuration. It runs along the south of the freeway and along the gunnery range over to 14 South, and then we take it up to on Arizona Avenue to the freeway. It preserves a very significant Hispanic population in this area for District 7, which was we felt was necessary in order to keep the Hispanic voting population in a safe area for this district. On communities of interest, as I say, we've got 2 rural districts. We do not split any Indian reservations. We have what is effectively a river district, Colorado River District on the west that includes Flagstaff, which has very close ties, as you know, to the Grand Canyon and the Colorado River area. A lot of the agricultural area in Yuma ends up in this river district, and that agriculture is essentially totally dependent on the Colorado River, and very interested in it. On boundaries, 8 counties are not split on our map. 2 are slightly tweaked, Cochise and Pinal. The remaining districts, except for Maricopa, are split between only 2 congressional districts. Our intent also, and we hope we have succeeded, is not to split cities and towns, except obviously for Tucson, Phoenix, metropolitan area, and Yuma. But other than that, we hope that we've been successful in not splitting any municipal boundaries. On competitiveness, we used a +4 or -4 test that gave us 5 districts leaning Republican, 3 districts leaning Democrat, and 1 district swing that is within the 4%. So I submit that this is a credible effort at moving from your grid map to a solution. I will tell you that there are, that we hope once you have given us access to your mapping software, which I think is coming on Wednesday, that we will try to check our map against your software as well and see if we've made any mistakes. We are also able then to adjust if there are some opinions that the commission wants to deal with, such as what the Hopis want for themselves or some others. And if we get that information, we will try to adjust our map and bring you a revised version of it for your consideration. And I've already offered, but I will offer publicly, our staff to consult with you or respond to questions or anything you need. We'd be happy to try to help. Now, if we could move briefly to the legislative map. First, a caveat. We drew 2 districts, 23 and 25, as they impact Pinal County. Using the software we had, it sort of did this other thing. We haven't really checked it to see if it works. It's what the software did to us. So with that caveat, you have in your paperwork what we produced in terms of these two legislative district proposals and the statistics that go with it. This, well, you can see the county lines. We left Tohono O'odham in together. Obviously, we needed to do that. This splits the county in a north-south direction. I have seen other maps that suggest that same kind of configuration. I will tell you, we tried to come up with something that when it drew a line horizontally, and we couldn't make it work. It just didn't work. It didn't work on a population basis. It didn't work with regard to the Indian reservations, where we have taken a little piece of Pinal County out. That's the San Carlos Reservation portion in Pinal County, because we didn't want to split an Indian reservation. And we have included Archen and Gila River and 25. And you can see we've also gone down into Marana in Pima County in order to meet the population requirements and give you an opportunity to consider two districts for Pinal County based on the fact that their population is too large for one and not large enough for two all by itself. So other than that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if I can, or obviously at some later time if your staff has questions, or actually they'd be better asked of my legal assistant, who did all the heavy lifting on this. I would just say one thing with regard to the congressional map. It has been a very long tradition that Congressional District 1 by number in Arizona include the city of Prescott, the first capital. I know you started this numbering system for a reason based on where your starting point was in making up the grid maps. But before you're done, I would suggest that you might want to renumber those for sake of history, if nothing else, or in case you wanted to go back to Prescott. So that's our stuff, and I'd be happy to answer questions now or later at your pleasure.
Thank you very much for presenting this today to us. Did you state what the Pinal County Governmental Alliance is? What's that comprised of?
Well, it's the county, the cities, the towns, the irrigation districts, electrical districts, and pretty much every political subdivision in the county. I don't have a list with me. I can obviously send you a list of who's a member. Be happy to do that.
That'd be great. I was just curious to know who all was in the alliance. Are there other questions for Mr. Lynch today? Or comments? Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, thank you for your presentation. I just have a quick question. You know, I went to Bullhead City during the public hearings, and I think the majority of the people were pretty adamant that they want to create a river district that takes up part of Yuma, but they were clear that they didn't want any part of Flagstaff. And I think your map includes Flagstaff in District 1, or am I reading it wrong?
Madam Chair, Mr. Herrera, no, you're reading correctly. It does include Flagstaff in District 1. We felt, well, again, we started with 4 and 7 to get the necessary Hispanic population and Hispanic voting age population that we thought would pass muster with the Justice Department. Once you've done that, then and dealt with 8 the way we did, which we thought was correct also, you then deal with things like Indian reservations and where they are, and you can't split them. And all of these factors come into play, and Flagstaff sits in north-central northern Arizona as a population center, sort of isolated all by itself. So when we were trying to configure this, we just, the software put Flagstaff in the district. Because now I suppose you could do something more in Maricopa County. Yeah, you'd have to steal from Maricopa County somewhere, or you'd have to break a county boundary at Gila County to do something. I really don't know what the folks in Bullhead City have against Flagstaff, but
Well, the people in Flagstaff felt the same way, so.
well,
In our what-if scenario, we have I
Yeah.
don't know if you've seen our River District version 2. I encourage you to take a look at it, because it does include Flagstaff as part of what you have as 9, we have as 5, and
Right.
has the Hopi and Navajo tribes together, so.
I don't envy you cutting the Gordian knot of northern Arizona. I'm aware that the Navajos have a proposal, Coconino County has a proposal, Flagstaff has a proposal, and of what I've seen, none of them are compatible. So I don't know what to tell you, except that we did the best we could to try to create 2 rural districts and to meet the other requirements of the Voting Rights Act as a starting point, in order to then meet, to the extent we could, the rest of the guidelines of the constitutional provision.
Ms. McNulty?
Testing. There we go. 3 questions. 4 questions. The first one I think is just because I can't see this well enough. On your hard copy, what is the green? What are the green areas in the north?
I think there are areas without population because they're in a national forest.
Okay. All right.
But I will ask Jill when she gets back.
Okay.
And
Do we have or will we receive a maptitude or Black equivalency map for this? Okay, then Willie will be able to tell us what the green areas are once he takes a look at it. Okay, sure. I mean, there's no urgency. I was just curious. 2 other questions. What is your analysis of competitiveness in the 2 legislative districts? And then the other question is, we've heard a lot about prisons in the Phoenix kind of Tucson corridor, and I wonder how that factors into your districts, your proposed districts.
I can answer the first question. I can't answer the second one. Jill can. And I won't even tell you where she is, but I told her she could have today off a long time ago, and I had no reason to risk my life telling her no.
That's quite all right. There's no urgency. I think we're so submersed in this, we didn't even realize it was a holiday weekend. We just,
Okay.
keep moving ahead.
I noticed on your schedule. No, if you will look at the handout, you will see that we have tested competitiveness on those 2 districts, and one of them is slightly Republican and the other is pretty much a third, and a third. So we consider them both within the test of competitiveness.
So that's your voter registration table here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Mr. Lynch? Okay, well, thank you. Yes, we can do that. Thank you very much for taking the time and coming to us on a holiday weekend. We appreciate it and look forward to hearing more from you all. Thank you. We'll go ahead and take public comment if anyone has any on these this presentation that we just had from Mr. Lynch. This is Jim March.
Hi, Jim March, last name spelled same as a month, representing Pima County Libertarian Party. I'd like to point out that the gentleman, the people who built this map appear to have tried to do a credible job. I think they put a lot of effort into it. And I have to say that I think the commission has, without meaning to, done those people and done that work product a disservice, because some of us have been talking about prisons. I'm going to say right now that the Pinal County maps are going to be most affected by the prison issue more than anybody else. They probably have the most densely populated area of prisons, especially in an area that's otherwise relatively low population. It's not Tucson, it's not Phoenix. So if you're not careful, you know, even by accident, you could get a serious mistake made with the prison issue in Pinal County. What I'd like to propose, well, first of all, I'd like to tell the commission that the Pinal County Board of Supervisors came up with a solution for the prison issue in their county. They set up their county board of supervisors districts discounting the prison populations. That's the choice they made. So if you follow that same logic, then yeah, we should be discounting the prison populations. And if you make that decision, then they're going to have to adjust their maps because it's going to skew population centers. The other way you could solve the problem, if you think you can't legally do that, your alternative is to publish a list of all the district numbers and list which prisons you're going to put in which district number. Don't worry about where they are on the map. If you have to do weird tendrils and blobs to grab prisons to balance them out, that's fine. But if everybody knows that District 1 is going to have this prison and this prison and this prison, state, federal, county, it doesn't matter. But if you know that the population is going to be balanced that way, then everybody can do their maps. These people, for example, can do their work knowing what to expect as far as the prison population outcome. And that's true of everybody, whether they're quote-unquote left-wing, like Richard Elias's group, Mary Wilcox, etc., or if it's somebody connected with Russell Pierce. Whoever does their map then knows what the ground rules are. We balanced out the prisons between all the districts, and cool, now we'll get on with work. But as it stands, with these guys not knowing what the final outcome of the prison issue is going to be, and they're drawing maps without calculating that, and they're going to have to recalculate their work once you decide whether or not you're going to fix this issue or how you're going to fix this issue. So the first thing I'm asking you is to fix it, because it's constitutionally required in order to get one person, one vote. And second, choose as quickly as you can how you're going to fix it and publish that. And the moment you do, then people can get to work knowing what the ground rules are. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Other comments? Mr. Lynch, did you want to speak on that topic?
I hate tall people. I just wanted to clarify. I don't know the answer to Ms. McNulty's question about prison population. I do know that Jill was working with your staff and on the issue. How we handled it is beyond my level of expertise. And obviously when she gets back on Tuesday, we'll make sure you have an answer. But I do believe that she did make some adjustments on both maps related to prison populations. But it's not that we did one thing or another. It's that I don't know, and we will clarify.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
The issue of prison populations has been coming up quite a bit, so, and I don't see that as a future agenda item. I think I agree with Mr. March that we do need to decide what we're going to do with the prison population, how we're going to work that out, and then go forward. I think it'll make sense if we come up with a solution that when people are doing maps, they'll take those into account, the prison population. So the sooner we do this, the better.
Agreed. Any other comments on that topic? Mr.
Madam Chair, we're going to talk about a future agenda item, and I would agree with Commissioner Herrera. I also think we should have council look into the issue and report to us and discuss it with us as well.
Agreed.
And one last item, if I may.
Mr. Herrera?
There's been states that have figured out, or they've come up with their own solution of how to deal with the prison population. So giving us some ideas of what other states have done, like New York, I think that'd be at least giving us some options or ideas of what other states have done.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the Pinal County presentation? Okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rowe. to remind everyone, if you didn't hear Mr. Rowe, is to speak directly into the microphone if you come up to talk to us, so that we get an accurate accounting, and also for the web streaming that we're doing.
Madam Chair,
Ms. McNulty?
I would just add that in the presentation that we put together, Council, regarding the prisons, I think we need to know where the prisons are in Arizona, and what the prison populations are. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comments? I don't think there's anyone else from the public who wanted to say anything. So thank you again, Mr. Lynch. We appreciate your presentation. Next item on the agenda is review, discussion, and direction to mapping consultant regarding ideas for possible adjustments to congressional grid map based on constitutional criteria. So in our past meetings, we've given some homework to our mapping consultant to do some what-if scenarios for us, and I think they did that homework, and we'll go ahead and talk about the results of that right now on the congressional.
Hello? Yes, we did do 2 more what-if maps to reflect questions you guys had at the last meeting. Would you prefer that we started with the 3 border district or the revisions to the river district?
Either one. I'm flexible.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Well, let's start with the 3 border district then.
Okay.
All right, so basically here is the, the 3 border district map. The shaded area is the Indian reservations. I believe you all have handouts that list the data that underlies this map. Are there specific areas you'd like to look at? I guess I could just start with what, with our direction going into this. Commissioner Sturts asked that we keep Yuma whole. So I started based off of that. So that was the first line that I moved, was to make sure that Yuma stayed whole. I did have to expand that a little bit just because of the Goldwater range. It has large census tracts. So in order just to kind of clean it up, I moved that whole line over a little bit. When you lose the Hispanic population that's down in Yuma County, you do have to go farther up into Maricopa in order to get the 2 majority-minority districts. Zoom in a little bit here. So you see that this District 2 that goes down to the border does have to go pretty far up into Phoenix in order to satisfy the Voting Rights Act. Let me just clean things up a little bit here. Turn the Indian reservations off. I'm going to remove the shading from the district so you can see some of the things that are underneath it. Okay. Okay, so you can see that this District 2 that reaches down to the border and it has parts of Tucson and Santa Cruz County reaches over, grabs Guadalupe, and goes up into central Phoenix a little bit. Is there a specific area you'd like me to go to, or are there any changes you'd like to discuss right away? Something we can maybe do right now on the fly to see how it affects things. I can also move the map around to show you more detail in certain areas.
Any commissioners have any direction to give Willie on this?
HVAP,
All right.
statewide.
Okay. Currently, let me hide a few columns. Sorry. All right. So the HVAP for each district is, move this over so you can see.
Just if you just put it on the map, Willie.
Oh, just
Add that
shade it?
layer.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that. So statewide, you can see that District 2 is the okay, District 2 and if I zoom in again, District 7 are the two districts that are above 50% Hispanic. District 3 is the next highest, and that is at, oh, I should also mention, for anybody watching, Buck, are these available on the website right now? In 15 minutes, these will all be available on the website for anyone watching on the live stream. Sorry about that. And the percentages specifically are, in District 2, it's 56.58% Hispanic, and in District 7, it is 52.59% Hispanic.
That doesn't show us the Hispanic population statewide, however.
Oh, you want to know just the statewide number of?
I just want to see the statewide Hispanic, concentrations of Hispanic population statewide.
Okay, I can do that. I think probably census tract would be good. You want to see the shading? Okay, there you go. Is that what you're looking for?
Yes.
Okay. So areas that are the brightest red are above 76% voting age Hispanic.
What's the population of the San Luis area? That, the area on the lower left in red.
San Luis has 25,505 people. They are 16,000%, or 16,000 of them are white. I can look at the voting age also. Is that specifically what you're asking? Or?
That's a start. We'll
Okay.
take a look at it once we get the,
Okay,
once we have a chance to look at the file. Thanks.
sure. Are there any other things to look at right away?
Can you go back and zoom in on the Phoenix metro area?
Yes. Okay, so you can see because so much of Maricopa's population is now going down to the border, we did have to make this District 7 reach out to Mesa to grab that Hispanic population. You can change these lines in a couple ways, but there aren't that many other clusters of Hispanic population. So as far as moving areas, I'd be more than willing to entertain any suggestions. If there's any areas you want to make sure are kept together, we could do that right now. Or I can zoom in further if you'd be interested.
Can you show us the boundaries of Tempe? Does that line come through the middle of Tempe?
Yeah, let me zoom in a little more and show you that. Okay. I'm going to turn. So unfortunately, the census place line is very jagged because it reflects, municipal boundaries. So I'll do my best to show you this. So it does cut Tempe into a couple pieces. This area right up in here is Tempe. So there is part of District 7 goes across Tempe, and again, that's to grab some Hispanic population that's in Mesa. It'd be possible probably to keep Tempe whole if we went up through South Scottsdale and back around. Just have to adjust it certain ways.
Willie? Madam Chair?
Mr. St-
Willie, would you turn back on the density layers, please?
Sure. So this is Hispanic, this is HVAP by census tract. And those are the census tract numbers. I can remove those.
So just out of curiosity, you mentioned a couple other places you could grab the Hispanic population from instead of going to Mesa. What would those be? Just to,
I mean, potentially, to take some other parts of Glendale. For these draft maps, I tried to keep whole tracks where possible. So it's possible that if we start moving individual block groups or even individual blocks, we'd be able to, tweak it here and there to grab some more population. I'm not sure the size of El Mirage, but there is some Hispanic population up there. But there's not the other option is always to try to remove some of the non-Hispanic population. Unfortunately, where we do have non-Hispanic population, it's needed as a bridge between the other ones. So one option would be like for in this area to make this, a much narrower arm that comes out to remove some of the white population. We could do that right now if you'd be interested in seeing how that looks, how it affects the map. So if I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay. Now if we take some of this population from District 7 and move it into District 9, that much. Track level. My pending changes up. Sorry, I apologize. The screen's a little a little smaller when it's projected, so it's a little hard to see. But for instance, that change, if we were to accept it, I'll just accept it for the sake of showing you how this works. Now have the Hispanic population of District 7 just went from 52.59% up to 53.08%. It did lose population, so in order to get it back to the 710,000 and keep it at that level, we have to grab Hispanic areas that are at least 53.09%. It's possible we could even raise it when we grab other areas, but that's the type of tweaks we have to do in order to meet the Voting Rights Act requirements in some of these areas. I'd be more than happy to go through any hypothetical changes you guys would like to see right now, if that would be helpful. I do think it might be good in some of these sessions to kind of get in the habit of doing a little bit of drawing so we can, everybody can understand some of the issues we face or some of the considerations that are made when, placing some of these boundaries. So if there is anything you guys would like to do now, that'd be great. Or if this is something you guys wanted to explore further today, I'd be more than happy to revisit this map tomorrow. We have plenty of time, I think, and we could do anything during the session that you guys would like.
I have a question. I'm curious about these 3 border districts and keeping Santa Cruz whole.
Okay.
Is there a way to do that? Just,
Let me take a look for you.
I realize we'd have to adjust one in some way, but.
The reason it isn't whole right now is because the non-Hispanic population that is on that eastern edge, I pretty much clipped out non-Hispanic population anywhere I could in order to get it up to the threshold that was needed. I mean, everything's possible. One problem is that since so much of Pima County is very, very uninhabited, the census tracts are very large, and even the blocks are fairly large, so it's hard to, you can't just say, when you click one area, it takes a whole bunch. You don't necessarily move a lot of population, but it affects how things stay contiguous.
Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Willie, you can focus back on the Yuma area, the Yuma San Luis Summit area?
Sure.
Obviously, there's plenty of Hispanic population there. How does the Voting Rights Act affect the fact that they're now putting a district that is, so they went from a Hispanic, a protected area to being in a district that will not be a majority minority district?
I would defer to legal counsel on that. It's my understanding that as long as there are the 2 districts that meet the threshold, it doesn't have to be the same areas. But I'll let legal counsel handle that.
Commissioners, yeah, Willie's right. As a general matter, you look and see whether we still have 2 viable minority districts. Some of the other concerns, some of the other things that DOJ looks at when they're looking at preclearance is whether the commission looked at the comments they received from the minority community and took those into account in drawing those maps. So it'll also be relevant what sort of input we're getting from the minority community regarding the placement of Yuma County, because this would, just based on the numbers, appear to take a highly Hispanic area out of a district where they had an opportunity to elect into a district where they do not, although it still does maintain 2 viable, or two districts that may be viable minority districts. So, but I think that other aspect of what the minority community's input is and how the commission has responded to it would be relevant.
Thank you.
For anyone who couldn't see on the live stream, I just spilled on myself, so I apologize.
Any other questions or comments on the 3 border districts?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Willie, would you go ahead and pull all the way back to the state again, please?
Sure, and I think legal counsel had one more thing.
Oh, Commissioners, one other thing. In addition to looking at the numbers, in terms of figuring out if it's viable, once you start mixing and matching kind of different pockets of minority population, you still need to look at whether you have indeed maintained a viable minority district, as a result of that, even if you have numbers that on their surface look like they're viable minority districts.
Well, Madam Chair, that was going to be one of my expansion questions, because we have several other pockets of densely populated Hispanic areas that are currently not contained in either of the 2 majority-minority districts, as you're showing. I appreciate the exercise that you've gone through, because there's a couple of things that have been very intriguing about this process. One, I know that there are probably a couple of other iterations that you could do to capture, that 2 could probably be created in such a way as to not maybe capture some on the west side, and then 7 possibly not capture, needing to go as far into, but there's a couple of things that have happened. One, that am I correct in understanding that none of the Native American areas are disrupted?
I believe so, and I can turn that layer back on. And you know, you guys had made that a goal going forward, so I've done my best not to split any, and I don't think I split any in this map. There might be, you know, I was looking at it a little more closely yesterday, and since I'd already said I didn't want to change anything, and I'm not sure. There's some small areas up here. I mean, it would be easy to amend those, I think. But other than that, I don't believe there are any split areas.
Okay. And of this, on this particular map, if I'm correct, that we've got 10 uninterrupted of the 15 counties?
I'm not sure the exact count, but that's entirely possible. Yes. You know, it helps when we didn't split Yuma, which is oftentimes split. I could give you that exact count later, but I'm not sure if it's 10. But
I'm just
that sounds
doing the
reasonable.
math here as I'm just counting away. As far as the HVAP analysis, we are at such a preliminary level here, and this might be a question for council. What is your recommendation as we're going through this general programming analysis of these what-if scenarios, as we're starting to grasp onto what we have a desire to do? I think that what Strategic is hearing from the commission, and I'm not trying to speak for all the commissioners, but I'm beginning to hear that there's a goal of a river district, there's a goal of continuity of keeping counties intact, there's a goal of keeping native tribal lands intact. We're starting to drill in on some of the larger, broader brush points. When will it be appropriate for us to start drilling down past that level? And when will all those data points start to be accumulated?
I think as far as it pertains to the Voting Rights Act, the racial polar voting analysis is going on right now. I'm not sure what the end day of that is. Do you want to speak to that as far as the process we're going through?
Well, sure. I know Ken, Strategic's working on the polarized voting analysis that will help all that. So that's all happening now. But to some extent, you need to analyze, things need to be a little static in terms of what districts you're analyzing, although we can certainly present generically, you know, where there are pockets of polarized voting and that sort of thing. But it's clear from, and we can start giving you more detailed opinions rather than just raising issues at any point if you'd like that as well. I mean, clearly this map, the separation of San Luis is going to be an issue, is absolutely going to be an issue. And I would recommend also, you know, you can compare different maps and alternatives. You have a congressional map that was submitted by Hispanic Coalition. I think it's good to look at that because we do have some minority input on congressional districts and see how that compares to some of these districts. Also look at, I mean, the other issue, if you want sort of to start things to think about, you know, in terms of 7 here that has, you know, the other, I think, what they were attempting to create as a minority district does look like it has some compactness issues in terms of the way it stretches across Maricopa County as compared to some of the other versions of the Maricopa Minority District. And so I think that's something to consider since that is one of our other criteria that we need to be aware of. So I think I don't know if that's helpful in terms of concrete issues that you should think about when you're starting to look at these districts and think about how you want to proceed, if that's helpful.
Madam Chair?
Mr.
Ms. O'Grady, is the question regarding San Luis, is that because it is currently in a majority-minority district? Or is that, I'm trying to understand the specificity of that community versus other communities that have high dense populations in other areas that currently are not in majority-minority districts as it currently stands today.
Commissioner Sturts, there you'd be taking an area out where they have an opportunity to elect, moving into an area where they don't. So that's going to be one of the issues. It might be helpful you to, kind of look at this map, look at the Hispanic Coalition map, look at the current map, and just see how those compare in terms of the district boundaries.
But
In
again,
terms of flagging issues, it's going to be an issue.
Madam Chair, so great. Again, the question goes to the areas in other parts of the state where there are high-density populations that are currently not in, as we are currently sitting, that are not in majority-minority districts. Is the issue, is the hot button that you're seeing because that population would be extracted from a currently majority-minority district, or would it be that we are, or should we also be paying attention to the other density centers in other parts of the state that currently are not included in majority-minority districts?
It doesn't hurt to pay attention to those as we're, adjusting the grids and developing new minority districts. What I asked Willie to look at, if it's helpful, is the current, if we can, the current districts with the current demographics. So you can see if there are concentrations of minority population outside of those areas in a compact way, and maybe that's not going to be that helpful. But I just flagged that, as an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Now that is when we're creating the new districts, and I do think it's helpful to look at the input that we receive from the minority communities and pay attention to that as we are creating the new minority districts. And if I'm causing more problems with the reconfiguration, you can move on to another point.
No, actually, this is the, Madam Chair, this is the sort of dialogue that we need to start to have. If we don't begin this sort of dialogue now, we're going to be spending a lot of time in a bunch of what-if scenarios that may or may not ever result in a map to move forward with. So,
I agree completely. And we were talking about this. We've been asking our mapping consultant to create what-if scenarios that are great, standalone what-ifs. But how do we begin to amalgamate these into one map, and also taking into account the maps that the public's giving us, and like having layers of what they're presenting, onto what we're doing. And I think that would be really instructive if it's possible.
Yeah, are there any of the submitted maps that you guys would like to see? And also just speaking towards, kind of going towards a final map, if I do understand, every what-if at this point, we are drawing 2 majority-minority districts, and all the what-ifs have kept Indian reservations whole. So I think if we can keep adding criteria such as those that everyone can agree on in principle, and that they should be part of the what-ifs, the more we do that, the better. But are there specific submitted maps that any of the commissioners would like to see overlaid with this?
Well, Madam Chair,
Mr.
I have another what-if. I'd like to go back to the what-if that respected the county boundaries, and then apply our new criteria, which are keeping the reservations whole. And I'd also like to go and have you sort of overlay the minority coalitions map on the majority-minority districts onto that, merge them in effect. That's going to destroy some of the, it's going to force you to cross some county lines, I'm sure. But so I'd like, with that as a starting point, the respect for county lines, apply the criteria we're now applying to every what-if map going forward.
Would it make sense then, if we're going to be merging that with the majority coalition, for the starting point, should we use the majority coalition and then in places where we can try to expand to whole counties? Or would you, I'm just, the best way to merge that would
I'm going to have to leave that to your judgment.
Okay.
And maybe there's more than one way to do it.
Okay. I will take a look at that. So just to clarify, I just want to make sure I have the whole county boundaries with whole reservation areas, the 2 majority minority, and looking at the majority coalition's submitted map. That should be fun.
Are you going to do that right now, Willie, or?
Yeah, we could go into that one right now.
I have another one that I want to look at, so I'll tell you what that is, and then you can decide whether we want to, I think we should just go ahead and do yours and look at it, and then do the next. But the one I would like to look at is the Greater Arizona Success Map with the Minority Coalition map also. We could do that later. Or
Okay. Well, let's look at the whole county.
it might also be instructive to compare, well, that's enough for now.
Okay, so here's the what if with whole counties. And I do apologize, I'm not as familiar with this one because this is one of the ones that Ken drew, so just excuse me if I bump around just a little bit, I'm sorry. You know, I apologize. I don't think I have, we've received the Minority Coalition's map in electronic form. Maybe this would be a good time to look at what we have. Let me just make sure. I'm sorry about that. So right now in the submitted maps, we have the Greater Arizona Success congressional map, the Hispanic Coalition for Good Governance congressional map, the City of Flagstaff's congressional and the City of Flagstaff's legislative maps, Navajo Human Rights Commission's map, and the Pinal County Government Alliance's congressional and legislative district map. Sorry. And I believe the Arizona Minority Coalition is a different organization, and right now all we have from them is pictures of their maps. So I think the request has gone out to get those, and we just haven't received them yet. I apologize.
Can you put up the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government map instead?
Yes. Okay, so the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government only submitted 2 districts. And they are the one that takes into account Yuma and Santa Cruz and goes up, and then one that is, you know, central Phoenix, I guess, Maricopa County. And I should also mention, as we're looking at some of these, the maps, the 4 what ifs that we have for today, and the these submitted maps also, I have added on we've run compactness measures on the what ifs, and I believe we have available as fields to look at the average statewide percent Democrat and Republican of the last 2 cycles. So the 10 races that were statewide in 2008, 2010, the average percent. So that is one competitiveness measure that now that Ken's presented and kind of gone over, I think Chairwoman Mathis asked us to have available to look at also. So that is available additionally.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Billy, when will you be integrating the 2004-2006 data?
We're waiting for, I guess, legal direction for us to start looking at that. I believe it's a contract add-on for us, so we've done some prep work getting into it, but we weren't gonna say we need to do this unless directed by you guys, because I think it's an additional cost to the commission.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I think the 2008, 2010 elections make sense. I mean, they had the most recent ones. Unless it's necessary, I don't see the need to get 2004, 2006 into this. Those are the two most recent elections, 2008, 2010, and I think it makes sense to go with that. So I would not be in favor of including 2004, 2006, and then adding more cost to this whole process.
Ms. O'Grady?
Madam Chair, we have been talking about the issue, and also including Bruce Adelson in those discussions. And our recommendation was to include them. They may not need, I don't think it needs to slow up the analysis, because you can do a lot of the initial analysis with 2008, 2010. Our concern was that DOJ may ask for that data eventually, and not have, and if they did, then we'd have to very quickly, it would delay things downstream. And also, we would like to have that data available just in case we want it for the upfront analysis. But our longer term concern was that they may well ask for that, and we'd like to be ready to provide it to them. But we don't think it should hold things up. They're ready to go with 2008, 2010. We've talked to the executive director about the issue in terms of a contract add-on, and I forget the exact number involved, but our recommendation was to go ahead and do that.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Is there a way we can find out if by contacting the Department of Justice, if that will be needed in 2004, 2006? If we have contacts there, they might be able to give us some ideas.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, we think it's very likely they may want that. Last time they asked for additional information on those elections. We can follow up with them if you'd like us to.
Sure, Madam Chair, but last time they had some issues with their map. I mean, there's probably reasons why they asked for that information. It wasn't because traditionally they would have asked for additional information. They probably wouldn't have if they would have submitted a map that pre-cleared. Is that making sense?
Madam Chair, I understand the question, and early on when I had some initial meetings with the previous executive director and also talked to NDC when they came in town, they all thought it was worthwhile, and so did Strategic, to have a expert go over and review, even though Strategic would do the work, to have an expert to be able to validate it, and that would ease the submission to the Justice Department.
And we're talking about
I'm off.
the 0604.
0604 data? Okay, I'm sorry, and I don't know the answer to that.
Any other comments on that topic?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
for purposes of a first cut look at competitiveness, since we have that data available for 2008, 2010, that's fine if we're using it for first cut. But I think ultimately, if we're going to look at voting patterns for assessing the competitiveness of a district, and we may or may not need to do that, I think we need the broadest base of data possible available to us. I understand why Commissioner Herrera only wants 2008, 2010, because those were, particularly 2010 was a watershed year for Republicans. A lot of people voted for Republicans. So that's going to skew the data going forward. That means to, excuse me. So if creating a competitive district under using that measure only would mean needing to skew the district ultimately Democratic in a future election. So going forward right now, fine for these first cuts, but I think we're ultimately going to need all this data to meet our burden of proof with the Voting Rights Act. That's going to be required of us to compile this data. And since we're going to have to do that, we should also make that data available for assessing competitiveness if we look at past election results in making that assessment.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
I want to remind people that the 2008 was a good election for the Democrats. 2010 was a good election for the Republicans. So I think that's a good mixture. I mean, I don't think I said 2010 only. I think Commissioner Freeman was mistaken. It was the reason I said 2008, 2010 is because I think it's a good balance where the Democrats did very well and then the Republicans did well in 2010. And again, the most recent data as opposed to going, because a lot has changed since 2004, 2006. So I don't know how relevant compared to 2008, 2010 that information is from 04, 06. So again, let me remind Mr. Freeman that the Democrats did very well in '08. So, yeah, I think it's a good mixture and a good measure of competitiveness by getting those two elections.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
the Republicans did pretty well in Arizona in 2008 as well.
That's not my fault.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
My understanding is that the 2004-2006 data is available. Is that correct?
Sorry, sort of. We have precinct results are available for 2004, 2006, but precinct lines have shifted. There's many places where the old precinct lines don't necessarily match up with the current blocks lines, which are our most basic unit of building these maps. So there's going to be a significant amount of work dealing with places where precincts have changed in the last since 2004 and 2006. That was, one of the reasons behind the VTDs is that the census asks all municipalities not to change their precincts for the last 2 years for purposes of redistricting. So there is data out there, but it'll be a significant process to have it available to use for this analysis. If that makes sense.
And Madam Chair, since this isn't specifically on the agenda today, my recommendation would be that next week we include it on an agenda item, and we can have the budget information, and the commission can make its decision.
Okay, sounds good.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
In all due respect, Ms. O'Grady, the discussion about 0406 is relevant to the maps and the data. As a trained architect, I look at the only way that I can begin a design project is to actually have all the programming data available at the very beginning, and to know that that's going to be part of the programmatic analysis, to not have not know that it was an omission from the original proposal, based on the knowledge that our recommendations from our legal consultant several weeks ago, it was brought up that Mr. Adelson had recommended at that time and said that DOJ was going to require it. I didn't believe that there were any exclusions in your original proposal, so to know that that's an ad service is not an agenda item for discussion, but that was a surprise. But more importantly, that it's incumbent upon us to get all of the data points that we have and all the data analysis in front of us as quickly as possible. I do not disagree with Commissioner Freeman. We can't stop the process now, but we need to get all of the data, all of the programmatic stuff, all the programmatic points in front of us immediately for us to be able to continue down this road, because we don't know whether or not what the adjustments are going to be when we start getting into the micro level. I think in a very short amount of time, we're going to take this from macro to micro, and we're not going to have the data available for us to make those cognitive decisions.
Thank you. Other comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, I think this is something us as commissioners need to decide. If we do take the 2004, 2006 data into consideration, how much of an impact is it going to have? Is it going to be an equal amount to the most recent stuff? So I guess we need to decide what type of impact it'll have on what we're trying to do. Because I really, as I said before, I really think the 2008, 2010 most recent stuff, I think it's a good comparison. And so if we're going to include 04, 06, then we as a commission need to vote on or decide as a group what type of impact it should have.
We'll make this an agenda item for our next meeting. Our next meeting's tomorrow, which we can't obviously change that agenda, but the next meeting. So we'll cover that then. Any other comments on this? Anything on this overlay that Mr. Desmond put up?
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to, change anything here, change the layers, show you any other additional information you want to see about these two maps.
Madam Chair?
Ms. McNulty?
Mr. Desmond, just as a comment, we need to learn a lot about these maps before we can start changing them.
Okay.
So I think it would be extremely helpful as a first matter, as these maps are going up, for us to be seeing different layers of geography, of voting rights areas, communities, town lines, things like that. I think we're not going to be in a position to start giving you meaningful direction on moving lines until we understand what the lines truly are and what the data layers are underneath the lines. So having said that, I guess my first question would be, and this is really Mr. Freeman's, he's driving this bus because he asked for this, so I don't want to interrupt him, but I'm curious right off to know what this little area is right here between the green and the...
I believe that is Gila River Indian Reservation is this shape right here.
So is this South Mountain here?
This is right here.
Okay,
And then this is Ahwatukee, I believe, right here.
okay. So as this is drawn right now, this is dividing Ahwatukee in half, so to speak.
I believe what's probably having happened here is I think the original grid had a line similar to this, but it's also entirely likely that some of the non-Hispanic population from Ahwatukee was allocated to a different district in order to raise this district to a Voting Rights Act threshold, a majority minority threshold. But this underlying map was just intended to keep whole counties, so I'm not exactly sure
Okay.
what happened here. I'm not sure if it does have two majority minority districts or not. Like I said earlier, this was not one of the ones I drew. Going forward, I will be, I think, drawing pretty much all of the what if maps, because I'll be the one at these meetings helping you guys walk through them. A lot of the time, Ken will be here, but I should always be here. So in the future, I'll try to have a better understanding of exactly why certain things are just the way they are.
Mr. Freeman?
So in merging the two maps, so to speak, you could overlay on Maptitude the Minority Coalition's maps for the two minority majority districts and effectively accept those. And then your underlying map, which is the respect county lines map, now you're going to have districts that are either overpopulated or underpopulated, and then you tinker from that point forward. Well, I guess the next step would be overlay the tribal boundaries and go through that iteration and then again make adjustments going forward.
Yeah, for instance, like if you look at this district, I can see that Guadalupe is off and is separated, and in theirs, the line goes out to grab that population.
Right.
That's like a change we can make. And then we could accept these ones. And these aren't the minority coalition; these are the Hispanic coalition. Well, no, it's the Hispanic coalition is the green.
The green lines
So-
are the, right.
So yeah, we could take those districts, accept them, and then readjust everything else to get back to, just right around that 710,000. Again, we're not doing the exact 0% population deviation yet, just because it's an awful lot of work to get down to the one person, and it doesn't really change things all that much. But as we've been going, everything's been under 1,000 difference, so a tenth or 2/10 of a percentage or so.
But you've shown us kind of what that merging process looks like. Can you go ahead, would
Yeah.
that be something you can make available?
Let's do
I
that.
don't know if you can't do it today, but we could have it available tomorrow perhaps.
No, we can do a little of that right now. So. Also, this is the pending changes window. you can see by moving that line, we're moving 5,523 people from District 6 into District 7. So if I accept that change, I'll recalculate the data table. Now we have no pending changes, and our line matches theirs. Now if we take things from District 7. So that's removing 14,000 people. I'm gonna also, just to make it a little easier, I'm gonna change the color. Not make it any better. So. Let me know if any of these colors are easier to see. I think that's a little bit better. So that's a case where that is also, or when we're selecting these, right now I'm at the tract level, so this is a series of block groups. When it juts over the line, that means the line is splitting at a geography smaller than tract, so we'll have to go in and do those afterwards. Let's try block group level. Sorry. I keep doing that. It's a lot of checking and double checking. Okay, so now this part of the western edge matches. By and large, there's some small fragments I can go clean up. Looks like it's a river or some non-populated area. I'll have to go in, clean that up later. Let me, you're going around doing it. Right, so right here you see, we just removed people from our District 7. Now we're going to add some more. Up here. I'll do this as a little bit of a training so you guys can see. I change our target group to 7 now. Let's try back at the track to make this go a little faster.
Willie?
Yep.
Just go back and say, how did you change the target?
It's right here.
Okay.
So in the redistricting toolbar, that's the target.
And there's not a way you can just select all?
Not totally. It's a. I'm sorry.
I don't want to lose the audience here.
Well, I again, this isn't. I think you guys kind of understand this process. I'd be happy to go ahead and do this during a break or maybe tonight sometime also for tomorrow.
It does seem like it's going to be a lot of work to make all those changes. I mean, we're only looking at the Phoenix area of the map.
Correct. So maybe it'll help right now if I go back to the full state, and you can see the other big difference between our map and their map is that they cut off, so they're going to split Yuma, obviously. And then, let's see.
And Chair, how about we do this as a what-if scenario, as we've done other ones, and then focus on the other one that's great on the other what-if, which is the River District, and we talk about that one?
Sure. If there's any other things you want me to wrap up here.
No, I agree. That's a what if, and it was helpful watching you do some of the changes, and then maybe we can look at a finished product down the road.
Yeah, definitely. I will. I'll try very hard to have that ready for tomorrow morning. No guarantees, though.
Do we want to look at that other congressional grid map, what-if scenario, and then maybe take a short recess?
Sure.
Okay, so the other one was the River District version 2.
Okay. So this is a map.
Willie, if you don't mind, Madam Chair, before he talks about the district, I say a couple of things of why I recommended a couple of the items. and
Sure,
then
yeah,
I'll be
tell us
brief.
the assumptions.
I took a lot of the public comment into account when I recommended, and I think Ms. McNulty did as well. For example, when we went to Prescott, Bullhead City, people in the Bullhead City area were talking about the River District and not wanting Flagstaff or not, Coconino as part of that River District because they felt they had nothing in common. So they wanted to take Flagstaff out of there. They also wanted to take most of Yuma, which is the part that they felt that they had most in common with, which is the northern part. So that's why I recommended for the District 4 to look like the way it did. And for District 5, when we went to, when we were in Flagstaff, people were talking about not being included with Prescott, that they had more in common with the other areas, the Apache tribes, the Hopi tribe, and also including the Pi tribes, which is that arm sticking out, which would be better represented in Congressional District 5 than it would be in 4. Again, taking the public comments into account. And for the 2 border districts, the Hispanic organizations that approached this and also public comment in Yuma, it really did reflect that type of district. So I just want to mention one of the reasons why this map looks the way it did, because we took a lot of public input into account, and also the Hispanic organizations that presented to the commission. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so this is a second version of the River District map that we talked about at the previous meeting. Changes that Commissioner Herrera mentioned, we tried to take all of the tribes in northern Arizona and combine them with the Navajo and the Hopi. We moved to not split any other reservation areas. I think there were some other split areas. One objective relating to Indian population that I was not able to, unfortunately, finish was the Achin reservation area. I could not find a way to easily move that into District 5 without completely changing the whole map. So at that point, it would have been a lot of other things different. And then there was some other direction in Maricopa County. I'm checking my notes. I moved Ahwatukee, South Scottsdale, and one other area out of what was District 7 and moved District 7 into Glendale, I believe up to Northern Boulevard. Sorry, moved Ahwatukee, Tempe, and South Scottsdale into District 6 out of District 7. Maybe
did that include, Mr. Desmond, the Arcadia area as well?
let me check. I'm sorry, I don't recall. The Arcadia area in Phoenix?
In Phoenix.
I don't believe I moved that area. The one thing is I've been using census geography. So there is a census place field, which is kind of like the municipality. Since things like Ahwatukee and Arcadia are kind of neighborhoods, I don't have an actual line for there. Ahwatukee is pretty obvious with South Mountain there. It's pretty easy to make the distinction there. So I moved that one over. I could look into Arcadia. I know you had asked that I keep Guadalupe in District 7.
Correct.
So I did that, and then again I moved District 7 north into Glendale up to Northern Road. So, are there any specific things you'd like me to look at right away with this one, or any areas you want to zoom to?
Willie, Mr. Desmond, if you don't mind talking about the two border districts, how, I guess, was it easier for you to respect the Voting Rights Act and not start reaching out as you did with the three border districts? Can you explain a little bit of that?
I would say, starting with the grid map, which was the starting off point for all these maps, looking at the initial Hispanic populations of all the grid map districts, the one that includes Yuma is, I think, the second highest, so it's a natural candidate to be one of the Voting Rights Act areas. It's not easier or anything, it's just a different process of adjusting it. So it seems a little bit more, logically speaking, you take the second highest one and try to get that one up to the 52% threshold or somewhere around in that neighborhood. But it's just a different process. You had asked me when we were looking at this river district to start with that area of Yuma going over into that district. So I wouldn't want to say it's just a different process,
Sure.
following your direction. And I can show you again what that dividing line looks like. If I turn on the census tract layer, you can kind of see there's just large census tracts here. So I just kind of kept that over and then went up into Yuma to get some of that Hispanic population. But we could do another version where some of these borders are changed. If you wanted to follow the interstate or any other sort of roads that are main thoroughfares or kind of thought of as dividing lines.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
The map that was presented by I hope I'm saying it correctly, the Arizona Hispanic Coalition for Better Governing, was very similar to what we proposed in this district, river district map. So I'd like to see as a what-if scenario. I think that's what Ms. McNulty had recommended, is overlaying that to see what the differences would be.
Could add that layer. So we have the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government. I can add that if you like. Change the color again. See if pink shows up. And again, tell me if any of these, if this isn't clear on the screen at all. I apologize. Okay, so I did not consult their map when drawing this, but it does seem to be fairly similar. Similar line. So this pink line, and again, I can make that a little, I guess it shows up fairly well, is the line they have cutting Yuma and putting over, and then the darker black line is what we had come up with.
So what do we have for your homework list for tonight on these? There's three?
So far, it's, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I just have Commissioner Freeman asked for the county boundaries map to take into account the minority or the Hispanic coalition's proposed districts, and then reconfigure our no split counties or minimize split counties, and the tribal areas also. Yeah. Oh, as a practical matter going forward, speaking of the tribal areas, is there any consensus on whether or not the northern Arizona tribes, it's okay to split them as long as their individual reservations are not split, or is it a priority to try to keep all three of those together?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Herrera?
Yeah, public comment, if you take that into account, would be to keep them together in the northern area. It wouldn't make much sense to, as you had in the three border districts, for the Pai tribes to be in the river district or the one that congressional district that is Yavapai, I think most of Yuma County. I don't think they would feel well represented in that district. So my suggestion would be that we keep them all together, the northern tribes in the same district, which would be with the Coconino County, Hopi, Apache tribes.
Any other thoughts on that from other commissioners?
Madam Chair, I agree with that. I think the Voting Rights Act is paramount, and I think we're trying to not to dilute voting strength, trying to preserve voting strength. And I think that's an important goal for the Native American population.
Okay, and the reason I asked that specifically is just because for the respecting county boundaries, we're going to probably have to, unless we keep Coconino and Mojave in the same district, we're going to split the Supai and Havasupai reservation areas. So, just
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
I'm trying to get a direction of what I think I just heard is that we're going to try to create one district that has got all of the Native American tribes in one contiguous district.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
I think it's just the northern, so it's the Supai and the Havasupai. Should they be with the Navajo and Apache and Hopi reservation?
Which is the, Madam Chair, the current version, River District 2, kind of does that. I think it does that pretty well.
It does, and it does split Mojave County to accomplish that goal.
Correct.
So, Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
we are starting to, what I'm trying to ascertain is that where are we of the 6 constitutional requirements that we are drilling down to right now. We are jumping into communities of interest as being, as creating some driving criteria, correct? Sounds like that's, that we're
I think it
jumping
could,
into some broader brush pieces here.
I guess you could interpret it that way, but you could also look at it as trying to address the federally mandated ones and trying to have a strong majority-minority district area.
Correct. So the 2 majority minority districts that we are talking about in this River District Revision 2 are 2 and 6, correct?
2 and 7, I believe.
2 and 7. Can't see the 7. It's
So, and I can go back into 7 here. So this is, if you look at the what we had for this revision is the dark black line again, and then the pinkish line is what we received from the Hispanic Coalition. So in this case, you can see we do match them on the the southeastern corner. We both have Guadalupe. We go a little bit farther east here, and we have a couple ugly areas here, that we would probably clean up as we continued this process, but just for the what ifs, aren't exactly finished.
So this would almost create a third, I would guess, possibly. What is the percentage in 5 right now? In terms of the tribal
Which
minority
percentage, I'm sorry?
population in Congressional District 5
As it,
on the River District version 2?
let me see. River- oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. In District 5, we currently have 18.98% Native American voting age population.
Sorry, I could have answered that myself.
That's all right.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr.
For-
Herrera?
For the River District version 2, Mr. Desmond, I'd like to make just one minor change. If you can, with the River District, which is 4, if you can get out of Maricopa County and go into the rural Pinal County. Again, I think that looking at or remembering some of the comments that people were making, that I think they didn't want to have any part of Maricopa County in there. But I think rural Pinal County would make more sense in this rural western district.
Okay. I mean, is that something you'd like to try to work through a little bit right now?
If it doesn't take too much time, again, I want to make sure that we can
think-
move through the.
I think that might be a worthwhile exercise to just kind of look at that.
Perfect.
Off the top of my head, I think that might be slightly difficult to do because, well, so is this easy enough to see? The orange line is Pinell County here. The river district is, zoom out again, is this area. So,
Yeah.
so this is the river district. We could come over, and if we took some of the,
Yeah, if you can get out of Maricopa County completely for District 4.
the problem is that to do that, we would have to go into Pima to get around Maricopa County. So it's possible we could take some of these, these large, this is the Goldwater range. We could use that as a bridge, I guess, but it's going to be difficult to completely bypass Maricopa County. If you'd like, though, we could look. So right here is where it kind of does get into. This is Goodyear here, and then it doesn't touch Buckeye really, but we could remove some of these western areas. Let's do that right now. So we'll add that to District 3.
Okay.
So I just told it to only take from District 4. If we look at the pending changes, you'll see how many people that is it's referring to when we do that. So if we did that change, that would remove 63,000 people from the river district and give them down to District 3. So I'll just, I know this isn't exactly what you're looking for, but this might help a little bit. So now I move down. This is District 4. We're going to add some back to 4. Okay. Just to kind of see what we're talking about there. And let me know if this is getting too tedious. I mean, would it, I believe this is Casa Grande down here. Do we want to, if we add that area, I could see what that would do. So right now we're at 27,000. We need to, we need to find some more population. Take all those. So it stays contiguous. So that took, sorry. I don't mind being on this spot.
Mr. Herrera?
Would you like to take a break while Mr. Desmond is doing this?
Yeah, we can do that. I was hoping to maybe wrap up the congressional and take the break, but if there's a lot of more changes.
Well, we can do that as a what if, as a what if
Yeah.
scenario, version 3, I guess.
Okay.
that
So,
okay?
so just to clarify, we have the two what ifs that are minor adjustments. So hopefully I'll have those for tomorrow's meeting, or if not, maybe we could schedule some time to kind of polish them off tomorrow. Can I just clarify one thing with Commissioner Freeman?
Please.
So just going back to the soup pie and have a pie, would you like to see them?
Yes.
It's okay to split the county there to.
No, for that,
Sorry, let me. No, that's okay. I'll show you right here. So, is it okay if I split that piece of Mojave County? Do you want them over here with the Navajo? And
put them over there with the Navajo.
Okay. And then, are there any other congressional what-ifs that can be suggested?
Ms. McNulty?
Yes, please. I'd like to, I want to look at the Greater Arizona Success Map with the Hispanic Good Government Coalition, Hispanic Coalition for Good Government map on the same together. And the other thing that I wanted to look at was a comparison of the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government map with the 2 congressional majority districts that you had drawn from the grid.
Okay. Which version? There's been several, you know, to meet the other what ifs, I guess. There's this one from the River District option. There's the initial just 2 majority district option. There's the 2 that come from the 3 border district.
I guess I would use this one.
Use this one? Okay, so just 2.
I don't think we've changed this too much from the,
So that would be so that'd be the greater minority success change to which one? Oh,
I want to take the Greater
Greater
Arizona Success map and pair it with the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government map. That's number 1.
okay.
And then number 2, I want to be able to compare the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government map to our 2 majority district maps. And if you want to use this iteration, that would be fine. And what I'm really just trying to do is understand in my own mind the concentrations, the communities, where they are, what the communities are that make up this minority population, and what the nuanced differences are between what the Hispanic Coalition for Good Government gave to us and what you drew, you know, not knowing Arizona at all. Just to see how close they are, how different they are, what the areas of difference are.
Okay. I think we have those pieces ready. If you guys would like, we could look at some of that today, or we could just plan on looking at that tomorrow during the meeting. I don't know how we are on time.
Either's
or
fine with me.
how much time is allocated. It's up to you guys completely.
Yeah, we can see how it goes. We've had this discussion for an hour now, which is what we had allotted on the agenda, and now we've got another hour for legislative. But if we want to, later after the break, maybe we can discuss, if you guys want to talk more about congressional. Is there another homework item? So that we have 3 requests I've heard. Was there anything from Mr. Sturts specifically that we want to see tomorrow on congressional?
Madam
Any
Chair?
changes, Mr. Sturts?
We are, I have a couple. One that's what's sort of a broader brush question is that we are, it appears as though we are, and please, Commissioners McNulty and Herrera, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're trying to drill down and using 3 submittals as our primary design criteria in this analysis. We've received a tremendous amount of not only map delivery to us, but I'm looking at a box of public comment that's been provided, along with thousands of comments that have been made. And it appears as though we are giving a priority to 2 or 3 submitted. That's one comment that I have. Second, I will give, if our goal is to begin to drill down the criteria and start to explore all 6 aspects of our constitutional requirements at this time, we're going to, again, it's going to be a challenge to do without having really reconciled all of the data that's been provided to us to be able to ascertain groups, because in one meeting there will be a group that will say that we want to be held in connection with San Luis in a particular majority-minority district, and at another meeting we've got Yuma testimony in writing and in maps saying that we don't want to have the city split. We'll have one group that is, in other words, we've got conflicting issues here that I think that we're going to need to work through. So if we want to start drilling down some of those at this time, not sure how you want to prioritize those, Madam Chair, whether or not this is the appropriate time. Because right now it seems like we're getting down to the micro level and moving moving blocks and streets, and I can't get my arms around it. I sort of equate it when I'm working on designing a building. I'm not picking out the chairs for the building yet, and I don't even know what the building is going to be used for. So there's a lot of data points and a lot of programmatic issues that we don't have, or that at least we're not distilling down to their places yet. So those are my thoughts as we're leaving. I've got lots of, if we're going to go down the path of doing micro, then I'll take the best information that I've had in my analysis and try to work together and give you comments on several of these maps that I could see making a variety of different iteration of changes. So, I mean, there's probably a dozen what-if scenarios that I would work off of River District Revision 2, 3, and 3 Border District map that would probably have a dozen different scenarios that could be built out of that. So I think what I'm asking for is some direction about what the next series of processes that you see, Madam Chair, that we should be going through.
I would say that we're still very much at the macro level and still looking at these what-ifs, and yeah, there have been some ideas for tweaking certain things to see what that does to the maps. But to me, still broadly, we're very much at the macro level and just starting to dip our toes into the micro level, and that's why I had asked Mr. Strasman to do some of those calculations, or Mr. Desmond, on competitiveness and compactness, just because we did have that presentation last time, and I thought it'd be interesting to see what those 3 different tests for each of those criteria did, and how they fare, what it means on some of these maps, so we can start to begin to grasp all of this, because there is going to be so much here that we have to balance, and no question the public input that we received is a huge part of this too, and we need to be starting to bring that into the mix. So I'd say we're still at the macro level. How we proceed, I would rely on my fellow commissioners to all of you discuss how you think the best and most efficient way to move forward in terms of amalgamating some of these what-ifs, and then also comply with the many criteria that we have to balance.
Sure, Madam Chair.
Mr. Herrera?
As I said in the beginning, when I was giving Mr. Desmond recommendation on the River District, that we took a lot into account. I mean, I was there with Bullhead City. It was pretty clear that they wanted a River District. So we're not only taking the maps that people gave to us, we're all taking public comment into account. And there was no mixed messages at all in Bullhead City. They wanted a River District that they had something in common with, and including Yuma. I am from Yuma, and the San Luis, Somerton, southern part of Yuma, Gadsden would not make sense to put in with the River District. It wouldn't make sense to be combined. Plus, we need to respect the Voting Rights Act. So, again, the southern parts, and again that border district with Yuma, and the 2 districts. Again, it's public comments that we took into account, public testimony, people attending the meetings. Although I wasn't there in person in Flagstaff, I was there via Skype, and again, they said the same things. And that map, the River District map that we created, reflects the public comments.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that that's understood, that we're not taking 2 maps into account. We're taking public comments and the maps that were presented to us by those 2 organizations, or 3, into account to put together this River District.
Thank you. And our staff did put together, as Mr. Sturts referred to, these binders of public input that we all need to look at and kind of refresh our memories as to what was said in those public hearings, and begin to see, did most of the folks say X or did they say Y, and kind of begin to bring that in. It's going to be up to, I think, all of us to review that information.
And Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Because both Mr. Herrera and Ms. McNulty and myself were all in Yuma, we all heard there was River District testimony, and there was do not connect Yuma with Tucson testimony, and there was do not break up Yuma County in testimony, and there was not break the city of Yuma in half testimony. So those are contradictory, and those are the things that we need to talk through. So at the same time, you might have heard that Bullhead City doesn't want to connect to the border. I wasn't in person in Bullhead City, but I watched online every single event that meeting that I did not attend. So, and I think the rest of the commissioners did as well. So whether or not we attended in person or we attended via observation, we've captured a tremendous amount of information. So I'm glad, Madam Chair, I'm glad that we're going to continue to look at this at the macro while we're continuing to distill through the information that we've assembled.
Thank you. With that, I think any other comments on congressional? Did you need any other direction, Mr. Desmond?
I just wanted to point one thing out for anyone here or anyone watching the live stream. There are the data tables available on the website. They should be up now. So they have this information that breaks out each one of these what-if scenarios, districts by the different racial groups. And they also have the, the 3 compactness measures. It is a little interesting. These, the 2 what-ifs we just looked at seem to have wildly different districts, and the total perimeter is only about 50 miles apart from the 2 of them, so relatively close. And they also have those competitiveness measures that we talked about. So that's available to anyone on the live stream.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys getting that calculated for us. Thank you. All right, well, with that, we'll go into recess, take 15 minutes. It's 3:28 p.m.
Nebulous, I guess. I would ask legal counsel to speak of it. There were some that were at like 49.8%. And so for the purposes of these, I tried to create 6 districts that were above 50% Hispanic voting age population. 1 district that was at the same level of voting age Native American population. 1 district that was coalition, so that is that the white population was less than 50%, and then the other minority groups added together to have a majority of the district, and 1 district that was a plurality Hispanic. So no group is above 50%, and Hispanic is the highest group. So that's slightly different than a coalition, but similar. So that was the only criteria I used. I didn't necessarily try to meet all of the same levels. Like if you look at this first one, there is a district that is 65.98% voting age Hispanic. I believe in the districts as they're currently comprised, the highest is around 68%. This, if we were to go with this map, you might have to raise that one up a little bit depending on how the polarized voting analysis comes, but I just tried to get above the 50% and then make 2 that were kind of a little bit higher to reflect the 2 that are higher now. But I'll let legal counsel speak if they have anything they want to say.
Commissioners, I'm still looking at the numbers and trying to compare. Part of the reason this is difficult to some extent because we have a history in Arizona of electing minority candidates from districts that aren't majority minority, and so so we need to look at all the numbers, not just majority minority. So anyway, I'm still looking at the numbers and matching it up with our old numbers and the new geography and all that sort of thing.
Other comments or questions?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Point of clarification from mappers and attorneys. The 2010 census percentages as they pertain to the current 30 districts, it was my understanding from Mr. Adelson that those were not relevant.
Relevant to the
Meaning that for example, the current percentage of District 13 is 68.27% Hispanic voting age population. That would not be considered retrogression if we had a new district that was, for example, as described on the what-if scenario option 1, the highest HVAP is 65.98.
To make sure I understand, we don't have to maintain the same percentage marks, if that's
That
what
was-
you mean. We need to, what
Right.
matters is that we started with effective minority districts and we retain minority districts.
But that was my
But the
understanding.
analysis is based on current census data in
Correct.
making those determinations and the electoral history over the past decade.
I was going back to trying to get clarification on a question that was previously asked. Thank you for.
Other questions, comments?
Madam Chair?
Mr. Freeman?
So just for clarification, you did not take political boundaries into effect in constructing these two maps.
Aside from county, no.
So can we do another iteration of these two maps where that political boundaries, either city, town, or county lines, become a significant factor in your drawing of the lines? I know you're not going to be able to keep everything full, and there's going to be some splits here and there, but if we could see how those maps look, it would be interesting to me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely doable. Buck, is it possible there's another clip? This keeps falling off.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
I think if I heard that correctly, Commissioner Freeman is asking, which is the same thing that I was asked, is that let's not break up cities unless we have to break up cities by virtue of their size.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, are there other areas you wanted to look at, or?
Where are the majority minority districts? Just, we've got how many in Tucson, how many in Pima County? I assume we have one in Yuma, we've got a few in Phoenix. Just run that down if you would.
Let me check.
I shouldn't call them districts, because they're a long way from being districts, but just things on the map.
Yeah. I believe Districts 1 in the southeastern corner, Districts 2 and Districts 3 are all majority minority. And when we go into Maricopa, Districts 19 and 20 are both majority minority, and also Districts 27 and 28. So there's 3 along the southern border, 4 in Maricopa, and I'm sorry, I should have said District 20 is actually a plurality, so that Hispanics make up the largest group, but they're not 50%. And then also District 29 is a coalition district. And then again, District number 7 is the Native American. I can zoom in more towards Maricopa. Is there other areas or specific parts, or if I turn off the census tract, you can see some of the, we'll sort of see some of the towns and counties. Let me change the color to make that a little bit more apparent. What's what? Does that make it a little easier? Okay. So, and maybe a good way of kind of showing you this would be, I'll just make some pending changes, then you'll be able to see. So if I click right here, I guess that's not, sorry, just bear with me for 1 second. Sorry, I'm just trying to show you where some of the different areas are. It's still a little tough to see, but you can see, Glendale, Towson, Maricopa County, Guadalupe. Are there specific ones you wanted to look at right away, or is there places I should move?
Let's look at 27.
Okay.
Let's see on that. I assume, does that include South Mountain? Is that the south boundary there? Being one of the few things in Phoenix that I always know where it is.
Hold on 1 second.
Looks like Guadalupe's kind of hanging out there.
I think,
What's up with that?
I don't think it does. I believe this is South Mountain, so 27 is a little above. Just 1 second, though, I will confirm that. Yeah, so this is South Mountain, so that is in District 18.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
So is your next go-round, excluding, I think, the three largest cities, which are Phoenix, Tucson, and Mesa, do you think it's conceivable from Chandler, Glendale, Scottsdale, Gilbert, Tempe, Peoria, Surprise, which are the next batch? Do you think that it's going to be possible for you to focus on trying to keep those intact?
It's possible to focus on that. We probably could draw districts that would keep those all intact. I'm not sure how that would affect some of the majority-minority districts. That'll be the next set, the next version of these two maps, I think, is going to be to try to keep all municipal areas together, kind of. So,
Even though, Madam Chair, we're off topic, we've already covered congressional districts, it would be a recommendation that you, likewise, there are certain municipalities in the last go-around that were split. You've got small towns split into 3 different congressional districts. I'd like to make sure that we can try to keep our municipalities intact for representation's sake.
Absolutely, and I will default to trying to do that a little bit more. I'll make more of a conscious effort as we go forward to make sure that when I or someone else from our firm is drawing these maps, we pay attention to that.
Thank you.
And keep that as a consideration.
I might just add, while we're talking about the political boundaries, I think it's fine to look at those things, but I think we've got a bunch of criteria here that we're going to need to take into account, including communities, compactness, and so forth. And I'm not on board with making it a priority to try and force municipal boundaries within these districts when that makes it more difficult for us to achieve other goals. But I don't have any problem with looking at it in the what-if stage. I just want to make clear that, from my perspective, we've got a lot of things to look at, and that's just one of them.
Mr. Sturts?
She clarified. Thank you.
Are there other areas or specific specific things you'd like me to pay attention to in this next round of these maps, I guess? Or would you be helpful to look at the option 2, and then maybe at the end we could look at option 1 and 2 over the top of each other so you can see where there is deviation, kind of?
I think that'd be helpful. I'm still using this as a process to understand where the populations are, what the state is made up of. And then I would hope that we would be able to work with these on a more intensive basis once we all understand what we're working with. So I think that would be a useful thing to look at the other option and look at how they compare to one another.
Okay.
Have we received any legislative grid map proposals from any, I mean, not grid map proposals from any sector?
Yes, we have. The one from Pinell County that was presented today.
Okay.
And then there's one other one. Just
Can we get one from Flagstaff?
yes, we did.
Okay.
That's the other one.
All right, do we have that? Can we load that in onto our computers? And
Sure. We want to look at it right now? Oh, I'm sorry.
we can look at the other option too while we've got that in our heads maybe.
Okay. I'll go to option 2. I just,
Consensus I'm sensing here.
so I'll go to option 2 then. So this is option 2. I'll go ahead and add those 2 plans just so we can turn them on if we want to at any point. Now, are there, again, places you want me to go look at right away? Or should we just kind of... I'll zoom in to Maricopa right away, and then we can... So in this map, the Native American population in District 7 is 59.3%, so a little lower than the other version, but I think still slightly above where it's currently constituted. So again, the green area is the Native American reservation land. The green area is the Native American reservation land. Excuse me. Is there any place I should look at right away, or do you want to start along the southern border again, or would you like to see the other map overlaid on top of this one? You can see where there are some deviations.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. The version 1, version 2.
Okay. So you can see a lot of the areas are exactly the same because we did start with the grid map. So a lot of the changes come for some of the the areas where we wanted to get to the 9 majority minority, so that manifests itself in Maricopa. Is there a specific place you wanted to look at?
Areas of difference, let's just zoom in on some of those to see how you've
Okay.
handled the majority-minority issue differently in
Let me,
different places.
Let me again shade census tracts. Okay. So in, let me also,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
I'm going to step outside for a while, but please continue without me.
Okay.
I can hear from outside.
sorry, I'm just trying to get the labels for both so you can see a little bit easier which district compares, so we can look at some of the numbers. Okay, so beginning with 28, I guess, that's a majority minority district in both. In option 2, it is 50.07, so just barely over the 50% threshold. I believe that's because it was one of the last ones that I tried to get to the threshold. In the other version, it's 51.83, so a little bit higher threshold. And you can see it does just vary in some certain areas that account for that change. There's places where they might look very similar, and that's just probably because the map kind of made it so. The changes altogether don't seem major. I think that's just because it's not that I did that consciously. I think there's just certain areas that, based off of the grid, lend themselves to becoming majority minority districts in certain ways. So I don't know, I think this might be a little easier to see. Nope.
I think we're going to limit you to a 64-color crayon box.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, they all think, you think they're all going to look good, but okay, this might make it a little easier to see. Sorry. Too many options. Okay. So this doesn't look good on my screen, but I think it looks all right on the on the projector. So this district, well, let's look at District 19 is the highest in both. And that's largely because there's a large population of Hispanic voting age population in kind of downtown Phoenix area. So.
And we need to do that in order to meet a benchmark. Is that right? That might be a question for Ms. O'Grady and Mr. Canfield, the 6355. You know what I mean? We've got one legislative district that we're contemplating that has a very high HVAP I guess we can look back at our benchmarks, but I'm just wondering if we're doing that because we need, one, to satisfy a benchmark that's hot, that is that high?
Well,
Goes
Commissioner
back to what you-
McNulty, yeah, I think that gets back to the question,
Okay.
what does it take to be effective?
To have,
Lawyers
okay.
may disagree in terms of where that number falls.
Okay, so that's something we need to look
emphasis.
at carefully once we get down into this.
Yeah, I
Is-
note that when it was pre-cleared back in the, a decade ago,
Right.
none of those were over 60%.
Okay, all right.
Um,
So the issue is,
Hispanic.
we need to be sure that they can elect their representative of choice, but we don't want to be packing a whole bunch of extra voters into
That's
the
correct.
district and diluting their effectiveness in other places. Okay. It does seem to me, just as a general comment, as we're looking at this, it's extremely helpful, but without input from the minority community, I think that it's going to be essential to have that input from the minority community about the communities within these communities, because this is a lot more than just, percentages of population that we're dealing with here.
And I believe what does kind of constitute this district right now is, I think it's at 68.27, so it's still a little higher than it is even here. But it's also far overpopulated, so it needs to be cut down anyway. So again, if I zoom out, there's some other changes between the two. It'd be helpful to look down in Tucson.
Do you know what Littletown is? I knew you would.
Is there another area that I should go to, or is there further direction for future changes? I think for both, again, I'll try to respect some of these census areas a little bit more, pay particular attention not to split municipalities when possible for the next round.
I'm not ready to work on changes from my perspective yet. I need to understand this a little better. Could we look at Maricopa? Is that like grown 4,000% or something?
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious to know what the,
Oh, sorry.
It's just north of Casa Grande,
Like,
the town of.
oh, so in both versions, Maricopa is split, but just a little bit right here. Is there specific things you wanted to look at? Yeah, or-
can you do just population density? Not,
Sure.
just general, not even, not minority, just population density
Sure.
in that kind of
In
area?
this area right here?
Yeah, maybe zoom out just a little bit.
Okay. Was that
Just
census?
trying to get a sense of these high growth areas and what's going on here and where they are. And
Okay. I'm trying to think of the best layer to display that at. Do you mind if I just play around with it for a second? Sorry.
I don't. Everyone else may.
Okay, so right now, this is shaded by census area, and it's population density of just the total population. So the whitest shade is 4,000 people per square mile. The next level is 4,000 to 8,000 people, 8,000 to 12,000, and then 12,000 and above. We might want to, for some of the rural areas, we might want to, this isn't, it's not even the best. Let me try something different. I think we can find something better than that.
That was good, I thought.
Let's try that. I'm going to change this from okay, this is the same thing shaded by census tract.
It helps to have the place names, the way you,
Yeah,
yeah, we need the census place names.
there you go. Can you read those, or should I make them a little darker?
That's good.
Okay. There's Maricopa again. Can show you the whole state. But by and large, it doesn't really help to look at, I guess, most of the rural areas. One thing I don't have right now. Well, let me check. One thing I can work at for tomorrow would be a population growth theme. That you can see where areas have changed.
Okay, that'd be helpful. And I also wonder if you could, you know, the snapshot we were looking at a few minutes ago, that was when you showed Maricopa and Chandler and sort of Greater Phoenix, we could see all of that. It'd be nice to have just that printed, you know, the population density with colored like that, printed like this.
Sure.
For, you know, the main population areas of the state, perhaps.
Okay,
Phoenix,
that's something I could get.
Pinal, Tucson area, maybe Flag.
Okay. Are there other things you wanted to look at right away with these two, or would you be? We do have the City of Flagstaff's proposed legislative districts and the Pinal County government's proposed districts. Both of them are incomplete. There are only a couple of districts, but we could look at those too if you're interested. Or else I can zoom in on certain areas again, and we can look at some of the other changes and stuff.
We've spent about an hour now on the legislative, so it's up to the commissioners if you want to look at those two proposals overlaid. Or are you ready to move on? Okay. We'll maybe do that tomorrow if there's time.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
are all of those maps available on the website at this time?
Yes.
The Pinal County? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I believe, I should say, you know, all these grid maps are also available, and we've been, I think one very user-friendly way of looking at them is the KMZ files that, you know, that are being hosted on the ARC website. So if you click on those, it opens it up on your web browser in Google Maps. You can, you know, just like using Google Maps, it's a layer in there, so you can zoom into your neighborhood or any area you care about and see exactly where those are. So people that might not have, obviously, Maptitude loaded up at home or anything else can use that as a way of seeing where those boundaries are drawn. So anybody who's on the live stream, I encourage people to play around with it. It's really pretty neat. You can look at it on the map or the satellite, whatever you're comfortable with.
Great, thank you. Anything else from Mr. Desmond? Okay, we'll be seeing you tomorrow.
Yep.
Thanks for your help. Our next item on the agenda is number 5, discussion and possible action on retaining a voting analysis expert to review, analyze, and recommend action on voting rights issues, including polarized voting, and conduct analysis regarding competitiveness. So we've talked a little bit about this, and I know our legal counsel did some research since our last meeting, and if Joe or Mary would like to tell us what they found.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Commissioners. We have been doing some legwork along with Bruce Adelson and our mapping consultants on the various social science experts who might be able to assist. And again, Strategic is doing the analysis, and they will continue to do the analysis on racially polarized voting, et cetera. So they are what this is someone who would have would sort of check the work, sort of an independent verification to make sure that the methodology and is accurate and sort of bless the whole analysis that's being done. Last time, for example, they also included experts as part of the process. They had Lisa Handley, who did polarized voting, and they had Michael McDonald, a professor, who did competitiveness, and our hope was to, rather than have separate folks, just find one person who could do both types of statistical analyses and verification. And as Bruce Adelson mentioned, this would be very helpful in terms of our DOJ process, having that independent verification, and I think it'll be helpful to the Commission. So based on our research, we were going to recommend that we look at entering a contract with Gary King, who is a professor from Harvard. He is the director of the Institute for Quantitative Social Science, and he has expertise in the statistical analysis that is both part of voting rights analysis and also has done work in competitiveness. So the idea is that he would, although the focus would be the voting rights analysis, that he could also assist to the extent necessary on some of the state constitutional criteria. And again, this is sort of a check the work, check the methodology. That would be, although Strategic will be doing most of the work. And Joe, do you have?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, the other thing to think about is you know, if there ever is a challenge, we would need expert testimony, and we would need expert analysis, and so this would be an individual that may be able to help us in that regard. For right now, obviously, Strategic Telemetry, they're part of the team. And there's issues that arose last round with designating the consultant as experts, so it's one more layer of analysis and review that could help down the road to have this additional expert look at the maps and do the analysis.
Mr. Camefield, as I read what Lisa Hanley did for the last commission, it seems that one of the functions of this expert is to kind of put the data that strategic telemetry would be developing into a narrative in a form that the Department of Justice likes. Is that another purpose of having this expert, to take the data and put it in a social science context and present it in a narrative with our pre-clearance application?
Madam Chair, Commissioner McNulty, that's certainly a possibility. It will just depend on what direction the commission wants to go and how much information we want to put into the submission. So,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman.
Council, I guess first a question and then a request. First, could you describe prior experience Mr. King has had in this area? And perhaps, I guess this isn't a separate question, but would you be able to give us a précis of his experience generally and qualifications?
A little bit on his background. Again, he has a website, gking.harvard.edu, that gives his biographical information and his other research that he's done. He's most known in this area. For example, he developed one of the methodologies that's been used in analyzing racially polarized voting, and that's what he's most known for. He also developed the Judge program that was used by the last commission for competitiveness, and so he's a very respected sort of analyst both on all of these issues, and has written extensively.
Does that mean we'd be locked into the Judge test?
Oh, Madam Chair, absolutely not. I'm just giving that an example of things that he
Okay.
has been involved with in terms of his background and experience.
Thank you. Mr. Freeman?
Does Mr. Adelson have experience working with him before or his work product?
He has not worked with him previously. No, he has not.
Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
Council, has Mr. King, Professor King, provided expert testimony on the specific tasks that that you're considering him producing for us?
Commissioner Sturts, let me double check that. I checked when we were researching folks. I looked at their expert testimony a while back. He has served as an expert witness, but let me go back and pull his specific information on that point. At this point, my priority, I thought the priority was someone help at the commission phase and at the pre-clearance phase, and then would be capable of testifying later. But I'll check back on his what testimony we have.
Thank you. And Madam Chair?
Mr. Sturts?
And Council, and again, I know that you have looked extensively locally, regionally, and we've come up, it appears as though we're at the highest time frame, and this is when all the experts right now are working and are really busy, because every decade this comes around and there's 50 states going through this, so there's only so many experts that are available. I'm not going to question why we're trying to find this individual now and why we're having to go to Boston to procure this individual. But have we exhausted all of our resources to the best that we have for the time frame that we're looking for at this right now?
Commissioners, we can keep looking, but we felt like we had really an excellent person who is available, and really I don't know that we'll find anyone, I don't think we'll find anyone better for what we need than Professor King, but we're happy to keep checking and giving you more names.
Madam Chair, Council, I looked at Professor King's credentials online last night, and he is other than the fact that he's from University of Wisconsin, very much just go. Wisconsin, good thing, University of, I disagree with. Being a University of Minnesota Golden Gopher. The cost of his services is extremely high. Could we discuss that, please?
In terms of cost, we don't have any, obviously haven't negotiated a contract, and we figured we would work with Mr. Bladine to see if we could get something done within a budget within the commission's budget with him. He also has grad students and postdoc students who he works with in addition to him. So he has the higher hourly rate, and then others have lower rates, but all that hasn't been negotiated yet in terms of a final package, and so that's what we would need to see if we could get something within the commission's budget. And if we couldn't, we'd be back to the commission with seeking another recommendation.
And Madam Chair, Mr. Bladine is probably going to be able to provide this answer. What is the budget?
Madam Chairman, Commissioner Hertz, we don't have a specific allocation, but we do have a unallocated reserve, and we would allocate out of that an amount that would be appropriate. And I don't know what that amount is until we get a better sense of how many hours. Christina did look up last time, and they ended up having 2 experts, and I think one was 24,000, at least as of a June billing, and the other was about 10. I don't have a total for that fiscal year, but we'll certainly get it before we go further. Does that answer your question?
Defines the brackets, I guess, for
What it might cost, or what happened last time.
So we anticipate that this is going to be an additional cost. It was an additional cost at the previous
Correct.
commission for this specific service.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, commissioners, I mean, I read what, I'm sure you all read what Mr. Canefield and Ms. O'Grady sent around on this topic. And they did do a lot of research, and I'm comfortable with their recommendation, especially since she used the word supremely qualified. So, you know, we don't have to say, I guess, today that we're going to actually, you know, sign on the dotted line of a contract, but to give them direction to be able to at least talk to, is it Dr. King or Professor King, on this contract and see what's, you know, have him give us some estimates on the number of hours he thinks this is going to take, how he can parse it out to the grad students and, you know, keep costs down. I think it's worth exploring that with him. And just based on what Mr. Adelson has told us, it really seems like we should get this person on board as soon as possible to even begin analyzing the submissions that some of the public have already provided to us. They can start to do some of that right now.
Well, and Commissioner and Madam Chair, again, strategic is, you know, capable of doing all that analysis and is doing that analysis, and this just provides that double check.
Right, and an independent validation of their work. So, other thoughts from other commissioners?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Freeman?
I would agree, and I don't know if it needs to be an action item or just a directive to council that we direct them to go ahead and further negotiate and bring a proposal back to the commission that we could look at and approve, I guess not tomorrow, but at our meeting next week.
Other thoughts from other commissioners?
I agree with that. I think we understood from the outset that this was going to be something we needed before we went to pre-clearance. I know Ms. O'Grady talked about it early on. Mr. Canefield did also. I think it was the feeling that we could do this later because strategic is doing the work. And, you know, it's later and it's time to do it. And I think Mr. Adelson reinforced that. My only request would be that we continue to work hand in hand with Bruce Adelson, and to the extent that he has contacts at the Justice Department and can give us feedback about you know, any information he has about how Dr. King has been or will be received, as long as he's on board with it also, I'm comfortable proceeding. If you're telling us this person is the best and he's confident that he would make a good presentation to the Justice Department, I'm comfortable with that.
Mr. Sturts?
Is that scope, as just described by Commissioner McNulty, what we'd be hiring him for, to be making the presentation to the Justice Department?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, not necessarily,
Okay.
no. I mean, and all that's kind of part of the budget. I really see him as an analytical backstop and letting Department of Justice know he has played that role. And what kind of written submission we get from him is sort of up to we would work our way through with what kind of actual documentation we ask him to produce.
Let me be clear about that. I didn't mean that he would be doing the presentation to Justice. I meant that having his analysis in the packet that we provide to Justice, presenting his analysis in the packet would be viewed favorably.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Herrera?
just that I agree with the three of you. That way, I think we need to proceed. If we need to either vote on it or direct the council to start, I guess, negotiating a type of contract and then bring it back to the commission for a vote.
Do we need to vote? I think we can just direct you, right? And then later, if we like the contract or whatever,
I
we
think
vote.
without objection,
Oh, okay.
directing us to proceed, I think will work just fine.
Okay, so without objection, we'll direct the legal counsel to proceed and explore contract negotiations with Professor King. And they'll come back to us and give us a contract and let us know what the costs are, and also include whether or not he's done expert testimony type work before. Okay, great. Our next item, thank you very much for doing that research, Council. We appreciate it. The next item is discussion of future meetings and future agenda items. So we know we're meeting tomorrow at 1:30 p.m. in this room. And I think that Mr. Bladine supplied, thank you, a list of schedules. Yes. We just thought it might be simpler if we started putting this on an Excel spreadsheet and trying to populate it that way. So we haven't all responded yet, including myself, and we'll get that to Mr. Bladine, and they can kind of look at the weeks ahead. But there's also a Word document in front of you, a printout, that shows what we had talked about previously, which was the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th we were looking at, the 14th, 15th, and then the 22nd, 23rd. And given that we are also busy with other commitments, there may be times when we just have to meet as a quorum. Obviously I'd love for all 5 of us to be at every meeting. But if it just isn't possible, sometimes that may be what we have to do if we need to move forward. So I had opened that thought up to others. And in fact, that does free, one of the restrictions on here was I am available on the 16th, actually. I don't know if anyone else is. That's a Friday. But I'm not available on the 17th, that Saturday. But I wouldn't be opposed to you all meeting without me and having one of the vice chairs run the meeting. So I just opened that up as another possibility.
Madam Chair, I think we have our schedule for the next couple of weeks, is that right? Are we trying to expand some of those dates?
Well, yeah, we could on the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th. There are some issues because on the 10th, for instance, I think Mr. Herrera could meet until 10:30 that morning. So the time that you see there, 12:30 to 3, wouldn't allow his participation. I think Mr. Freeman had a situation where he'd need to Skype if we met on the 7th. Is that right?
Yes, and I told Mr. Bladine that actually I could start a little earlier than that. Right now, I would say I could start at 3. But I'm going to try to see if I can get it pushed back to 2, which would give us an afternoon. But I would have to participate by Skype or by phone. But that's my problem. The 8th, I face a similar difficulty in the morning. I am absolutely out. But I would free up again in the afternoon by 2 or by 3, assuming I can get to somewhere with internet access. Friday, it says I'm out. It says not available late afternoon, but I might be able to, assuming I'm going to go flight back to Phoenix Thursday night, so I may have that entire day open. It looks like there's some other conflicts that day. The Saturday the 10th, I cleared that my whole day, so that was a personal matter, and I cleared it, so I'm available all day on that day.
Okay, and I would also add, I'm available, if anyone's available, the 12th. That's a Monday. I'm wide open. So if we wanted to cut any of, whether we, and it all, I think it depends on mapping consultants too, and legal counsel being available, but I'm just saying, if we wanted to, we don't obviously need to meet all 4 of those days, plus the 12th, but if we wanted to do some mixing and matching there, we could.
I'm available on the 12th. That might solve. So we could meet all day on the 12th and then
That's a
maybe
Monday.
not meet on the Saturday or not meet on.
Madam Chair, one thought might be if you did the 12th in Casa Grande, make it easier for everyone. And the 7th would, even if Mr. Freeman can participate by Skype earlier, it still would be a very short day. You might want to think about dropping the 7th and adding the 12th, because you'll get a lot more time together on the 12th, assuming that would work with the mapping consultant.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sturts?
looks like Friday the 9th is also challenging from,
Yeah, it is. If we met,
doing all day Saturday and all day Monday.
yeah, I mean, but then we're losing Mr. Herrera at least for part of Saturday. So, do we want to?
Yeah, and Madam Chair, there's some dates where, we've been, actually lately, when we've been meeting 1:30, 2 o'clock start time, and I think Commissioner McNulty mentioned, we probably need to find a couple dates where we can meet all day. And that probably would eliminate some of these dates where we're meeting for 2 hours, 3 hours, which, having those occasionally is okay, but having them, it seems like it's becoming a norm.
Yeah, I guess I would ask our mapping people too. It just seems like practically sitting in the room all day isn't very helpful though either, because if we give them direction to do some mapping, then they need time to go away and do it. So it seems like these half days do make sense in this phase, but I don't know. If you have other thoughts, how we can better spend our time.
Do I come over here?
And I mean, it works both ways with some of this, the take-home stuff. I guess the half days, I have plenty to do for for tomorrow, but it certainly wouldn't take me until next Wednesday to get everything done if this was the break. If we wanted to start as a commission doing more actual moving of the lines, some longer days might lend itself well to that type of work.
Okay.
So it's
So maybe a blend.
yeah.
Okay, well, what do people think about next week? It sounds like if on the 7th and 8th, Mr. Freeman would be participating via Skype, and they'd be afternoon meetings. The 9th is a pretty small window of time that people are available. And the 10th, we have Mr. Herrera missing part of that day. And then the 12th, we'd be available all day, if everyone is. So.
And Mr. Bleeding, this schedule that we have in front of us doesn't have all of the dates on it.
No,
right?
that's correct. This just has the dates that we had scheduled. And I think we electronically sent you a calendar also that we put it off, but we tried to simplify it by just giving you a spreadsheet that had the already scheduled meetings. And I think maybe in the future, if this works better, we'll do a spreadsheet instead of a calendar.
Okay, I think we need all the dates on it, though.
Correct, that's correct.
If I could just point out that I'm not going to the RS Foundation on September 7th and 8th. I think that's Mr. Sturts. Yeah, he hasn't invited me, so if you'd make that change. And I'm available every day between now and Christmas.
That's easy.
I do
As I
recall you
said.
offering that. Thank
Okay. So next week, what are we, Monday next week doesn't work, it's Monday the week after, is that right?
Right.
Correct.
Well,
Okay.
and we should look at the rest of that week too, the 14th, 15th, because the 15th, I think, is the tribal meeting. Is that right, Mr. Bladeen?
Correct.
And so we're going to meet with them, and we could have a meeting, our own meeting after that. I'm not sure how long. We haven't heard from them yet, I don't think.
I did have a brief conversation, and we perhaps could start at noon, and then at the Heard Museum, I'll try to verify that, have a meeting with tribal leaders at 1, and then once that's over, also have a continuation of our meeting, probably up till 5 at the Heard. I haven't completely verified that, but I have talked to their consultant, and that looks like that might work if you wish to do it.
Madam Chair, why don't we meet with whoever's meeting with the tribe leaders, why don't they meet with them after the meeting? So we schedule a meeting at 12 o'clock, meet with them, finish it at 5, and then meet with the tribal leaders after 5 o'clock.
Madam Chair, the time of 1 o'clock works for them because they have another meeting. They're in town. They're all in town for 2 meetings. And 1 o'clock is when they are available in between their other meetings. So it would be difficult to change them at this point.
Sure, that day, as I mentioned, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, I think that's a Friday.
Thursday.
Thursday.
You know what, then never mind.
And then the 16th is open. Would that work? That's a Friday?
Sure, the 16th is open.
And then you guys can meet the 17th.
16th is enough. We'll take advantage of your.
Okay, so
So there's no way we can work something else in next week. Monday doesn't work, Tuesday doesn't work. Wednesday, it would have to be after 4, is that right?
we could, Mr. Freeman said maybe 3.
Maybe 3?
Maybe 3, maybe
That was the
earlier.
day you were thinking, okay.
Madam Chair, I'm next week I'm open all day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Again, keeping in mind the 5 o'clock hour, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. If I can meet as early as we need to meet.
Okay. Well, does it make sense to go Wednesday? Or we could go Thursday, Saturday, Monday.
Looks like Scott's tied up all day Thursday, is that right?
No, that's not. I have a deposition beginning at 9, and I would anticipate that it would conclude by 1. So I would be available that afternoon.
Or we could go Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Monday.
It'd be nice if we could avoid Saturday, 2 Saturdays in a row. I don't mind meeting this Saturday, but
So then you would meet the 16th.
I would love to meet the 16th, as opposed to the 17th.
Oh, I meant the 17th, sorry. That's a Saturday.
I'd love to meet the 10th rather than Labor Day weekend.
Too late.
Mr. Sturts?
And I'm sure what we need to do the best we can to fix these, because I'm building my schedules around the dates that we went through last time. And if we're going to adjust them, I need to rebuild a schedule again. So
Yeah, I'd
and I know
really-
that all of us are busy. but we're trying to build around dates and times. And
I would like to
So let's-
lock these in.
so
So,
Can we do September 12th? Can we lock that in? I think that seems like a,
it's a Monday,
I'm available.
and all day, everybody's available, and so Ray said that might be Casa Grande, but we can decide
Or
that
Tucson.
later. Or Tucson.
Where would you like me to schedule it?
Again, Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, I have the commitment that starts at 6, so drive time
Sounds like Phoenix.
Or Casa Grande.
sounds like Phoenix.
Casa Grande.
Madam Chair, stand up for Tucson.
Do you only have 3 members in Tucson? So I think if at all possible, if we could do the Monday, Wednesday, Friday meetings in Phoenix, and then any other days, you can do them anywhere else. I don't care.
Thank you for your flexibility.
Oh, I didn't say that.
Okay, so we're getting punchy with the time. So let's, I like the Casa Grande idea, frankly, when possible, just because it is partway for all of us. But let's decide on the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 12th thing, because if we're definitely meeting the 12th, that's a Monday. We don't need to meet, all 4 of those other days, and so, any suggestions on what would make the most sense?
I think it makes the most sense to do Wednesday or Thursday, depending on what you think is going to work best.
Yeah, one or the other, and let's do Wednesday.
And could we do it in Casa Grande? Or that doesn't work for you, because then
It doesn't
it
matter.
adds an hour.
No.
Oh, you're going to Skype? Okay, all right.
Okay, well, and let's not meet that Friday, since it's a short window. There's 3 hours available, and it's the least amount.
Which day were you talking about?
The
Madam
9th,
Chairman? The 9th?
Friday the 9th. We don't have very much bandwidth.
I'm sorry, did you say Wednesday? If we did Thursday, it would be easier for Jose, because then if we met in Casa Grande, he wouldn't have your issue, right?
Well, again, on Thursday, I would be Skype. Wednesday and Thursday, I would be participating remotely. So
But
wherever you want to hold the meeting is fine with me.
if it works either way for you, then if we did it Thursday, we could do it in Casa Grande, and it wouldn't mess up, be a little easier for the 3 of us, and it wouldn't mess up Jose's schedule.
Very kind of you.
So
Is that okay?
That's fine.
Thursday?
That's fine.
So after tomorrow, our next meeting will be Thursday, September 8th in
All day?
Casa Grande. Well, it looks like we're starting at 2. There must be a reason for that.
Because I'm in a deposition that morning.
Oh, right, okay.
Madam Chair,
Sorry.
If I may, if we start at 2, which is fine, because we want to accommodate Mr. Freeman, but we also want to do it as late as, I want to stay there as late as possible, as opposed to leaving at 5, or, because we've done that a couple times where we go to Casa Grande and the meeting ends at 3:45 or 5 o'clock. So start time 2 o'clock and then end whenever it ends. Is that okay?
I've got a 10 p.m. flight, so.
I'm sorry, I
it's
didn't know
fine.
about that.
No, in anticipation of that, so I'm available. As long as you guys don't want to go past about 9 p.m., I'll be there on the phone with you.
Okay.
And we did have to leave early, Madam Chair, from Casa Grande, only because we had no power, so, just as a reminder.
I would have stayed there. No power.
And we lost power that night, so.
Okay, so we'll meet Thursday, September 8th, starting at 2 p.m., Casa Grande.
So we're not meeting the 7th?
Correct.
So let me,
Or the 9th. Now the question is, do we meet the 10th on Saturday? Sounds like Mr. Sturts and Mr. Freeman are both available those days. Yeah, you're available. We already heard that. And then, if we started it early, you would be available for the first 3 hours, right?
well, depending
Like
how,
if we started at,
Madam Chair, depending how early you start, I would have to be traveling to Coolidge for the football game, so I probably would have to leave by 10. So if you start at 6, squeeze in 4 hours easily. So
6 a.m.?
I'm an early riser, so. The 8th?
Yeah, we're doing the 8th from 2 p.m. on in Casa Grande. The 10th, we just need, we're not doing the 9th.
Well, Madam Chair, if, I know that we were proposing meeting on the 9th. Can we meet for those 3 or 4 hours on the 9th? And maybe not meet on the 10th, if at all possible? Because I know we have one scheduled from 4 to 7, and I can meet, well,
Well, we can go late on Friday. I mean, if you all are willing to do, if you'd rather do Friday than Saturday, and go later than, since we're not starting till 4 p.m.
And Madam Chair, I have no restriction on that Friday, so,
Okay.
which,
Do people like that better? Right. Well, we're talking about it. Are we gonna? If we start on Friday, if it's in Tucson, I could start at 3 p.m. But that probably doesn't give you a lot. I've got a work commitment that day.
Madam Chair, could you start it earlier, then take a break for whatever meeting you need to take a break for, and then reconvene again? So, having a 8 o'clock start time or 9 o'clock?
Yeah, I have a 9 to 10, and then I have a 12:30 to 2:30 that day. So what do you guys think? Do you want to start Friday at 4 in Casa Grande and go till however late and then not do Saturday?
or 3 o'clock in Tucson? Would that
Or
make sense?
mhm.
Capture another hour?
If you all want to.
Either one's okay with me.
Okay.
Fine. I'll
Yeah, so okay, so it's sounding like Friday evening, and if we start in Tucson, we could start at 3 and go until whenever.
So that's 3 Tucson on the 9th, 8th in Casa Grande, starting at still 2, the 9th starting at 3 in Tucson.
Okay.
Is that right? And then the 10th right now, you're thinking about canceling.
Right. So no meeting that Saturday, but we would meet Monday, the 12th.
Okay.
That's-
Monday the 12th, yeah, what time? Sorry, I didn't
All
get a
day.
start time.
We're all open, so we can start early that day. I guess we should maybe Casa Grande and
9 o'clock? Before,
Mhm.
9 o'clock?
That would be,
Mhm.
we going to Phoenix?
What?
Are we going to Phoenix at all? No, I mean the 12th.
At a later time. Yeah, we'll be there at the Heard Museum on the 15th. And we may end up doing the 14th, up in these parts, or the 16th. So if everyone could keep the 16th also as a possibility, that Friday, because that's not on it's not on the word processing sheet, and so you could hold that on your calendars. And then we're holding the 22nd, 23rd. And that's it. Any other thoughts on the schedule?
Madam Chair, just quickly, on the Thursdays where we end at 7, is there a reason we can't continue the meeting past 7 o'clock to, to avoid, because again, I'd like to see if we could end the Wednesday, Friday meetings, with the exception of the one on the 9th. I've made a commitment to these kids, and I want to make sure that I honor that. So if we can finish as late as we need to on the Thursday, and then on the Friday when we meet at 1 o'clock, if it is still on the 23rd, that we end at 5. If we can get some more time in on Thursday. unless somebody had a commitment where they needed to be out of the meeting by 7.
So this is on Friday, the 23rd, you're talking about?
That is correct.
Okay.
And going forward, with the exception, obviously, I already committed, I'll commit to the 9th, go as late as possible. But then going forward on the Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, wanting to get out of there by 5 o'clock to make my 6 o'clock commitment.
Okay, we'll try to do that. There may be times, though, where we just can't do it, but to the extent possible, we will. I'm not sure why we're starting at 1 that day. There must be earlier commitments. I mean, others might have commitments that day, so we'll have to, as we get closer.
Which day was that?
The 23rd, Friday.
I don't know. Right now, I don't have anything that says,
Oh, and we did
Oh.
have that as an alternative start for the
Yep.
second round of.
right, and I think the reason we did that is we were planning at that time half meetings, giving the mapping consultant one day and then a half a day and then coming back. So I don't think there is any reason we couldn't start earlier
Okay,
if Willie thought he could on the 23rd.
great. So maybe, yeah, maybe the 22nd, 23rd, we can start earlier even. We'll see.
I think on the 22nd, we do have a conflict up until about a 1 p.m. time.
Okay,
But on the 23rd, I think we could start whatever time you'd like.
okay. So maybe we'll move that one up earlier.
So like,
Madam Chair, just to confirm, the 14th and the 15th, we're just holding them? We don't have.
And the 16th.
the
Um,
excuse me,
so-
the 15th, you have a commitment with the tribal
leaders
council.
At 1 p.m.
But we don't all have to be there, correct? Because I don't think I agreed to that meeting, to attending, unless my schedule allows, and I don't. Like I said, I'm asking, we don't all need to be there. Whoever can make it should make it.
No, I guess it would be more like a hearing. If you weren't going to do any business, you just need to have a quorum. So we could do it with, if you wished, we could do it with less than all the commissioners.
Okay, so that day we'll meet with the tribal leaders at 1 and then possibly have a meeting after that
Correct.
ourselves. And then we're holding the 14th and 16th too. Okay? That was painful.
Can I just go through one more and make sure I have it all right?
Yep.
On the 8th, we will meet in Casa Grande, starting at 2 p.m.
Right?
And then on the 9th, we will start at 3 instead of 4. And that will be where?
Tucson.
And then we're canceling the 10th. We're going to do the 12th in Casa Grande,
Right?
starting at 9. Then we're going to do the 14th in Casa Grande, starting at 9. And then on the 15th, we'll be in Phoenix, starting at 1 or a little before, meeting with tribal leaders at 1. The 16th, we're holding open. And would that also be Phoenix?
Anyone want to, outrule him? Overruling me? So,
And then
16th, let's plan on
Phoenix
start date and early start time and
on the 16th, correct. 9 a.m. start time on the 16th. On the 22nd, we're holding open, and that could be a 1 o'clock. And where are we going to meet on the 22nd? Casa Grande. I hear.
I agree.
And then the 23rd, we can start early again at 9 o'clock if we needed to on the 23rd, and I don't have a tentative location.
Phoenix?
Is that correct, the 23rd?
Yes.
Is that Casa Grande, Tucson, or Phoenix, or Flagstaff.
Well, yeah, I mean, if that's the alternative start of the second round, there is that Flagstaff possibility, but
So I will put the 23rd as a tentative meeting starting at 9 in Casa Grande.
okay. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Future agenda items, I think there's a sheet in your folders from our staff.
And I did add, I don't guess I have that folder with me, but I did add 2 items today that you had brought up. One would be to continue and for an approval on the voting analysis expert. And we'll either take a look at that on the 10th or when we're ready to bring that back to you. I added also presentation and discussion on the appropriate methodology to consider prison populations. I added that. And I'll work with the attorneys to talk about a date. And then I also had present costs for additional census data that you were talking about earlier today as another item that would be on the tentative agenda we'd figure out a schedule for.
Other agenda items anyone wants to raise now? It's not your last opportunity, of course, but. Mr. Herrera.
The agenda item, adding agenda items or future agenda items will be in tomorrow's agenda as well, correct?
Yes, it will.
So,
Okay, everyone comfortable with the way things stand? Okay. Our next item on the agenda is, we'll skip over the Attorney General inquiry for now in case we wanted to go into executive session. There's the Executive Director's report. Mr. Bladine, since you're up, do you?
I think I will ask Christina to actually present most of the report, and that's to let you know what she has gathered for you so that you will have midnight reading to put you to sleep or maps to entertain you. So I'm going to ask her to go ahead and present that.
Commission members, right behind you there are several boxes. One box is for each one of you, including legal counsel. That is all of the written public input that we've received so far. There's over 1,500 written documents. And that also includes a smaller binder, which it's not really that small, but there's roughly 138 submitted maps. So that's all for your evening reading.
Thank you. Thanks for assembling all that for us.
Thank you.
We have one more thing. Anna Garcia was nice enough to put together something for all of the commissioners, and she wants me to present it, but I won't, so I'm going to make her hand it to you. Anna?
Oh, wow.
She was able to get from Judy, our videographer, that shows up the still shots of all of you with Justice O'Connor, and she was nice enough to print them up for you, so put them in a frame.
What a treat. Thank you.
So that's the nicest executive director report I'll ever have.
Oh, this is wonderful. Thanks.
If there are
Thank you,
questions,
Anna.
I'm
nice.
sure.
Sorry, and I'd also like to add that Shane Shields, Lisa Schmeling, and Christy Olson have been working really hard in putting together all of these binders and coding as well. So,
Yes, thanks to our public outreach coordinators for all of that, and I apologize for not recognizing them earlier. A couple of them were here today at our meeting in the beginning, so to Christy and Lisa, I apologize. But thank you. Any other items from the executive director report?
That's all I had at this point.
Any questions for Mr. Bladine? Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. The next item, let's do public comment.
Ma-
Oh, break? Sure, okay.
Madam, before we go to break, I mean, if there is nothing new for the legal counsel to talk about about the Attorney General, then do we have to meet as we did last time? There was nothing new, so.
No, I don't think so, but is there anything new?
Just
Okay.
one quick question, if I may, and then
Sure.
we can go on break. Is that okay? The issue of who's met with the AG's office. If you can you let us know? Because it seems like I know that one commissioner met. So is that still the same? Just one commissioner?
Okay, so this is agenda item 7, and legal counsel can give us that brief update, I guess. Mr. Canfield.
Madam Chair, I mean, if you want us to discuss the Attorney General investigation, it'd be our recommendation that we do so in executive session.
Even just asking how many commissioners have met with the AG's office, that would have to be in?
I'm happy to answer that question if that's in open session, if that's the directive of the commission.
Do other commissioners?
I don't see how
Have
that's
a thought?
attorney-client privilege, how that.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, it's not, we obviously haven't been speaking publicly about this matter. We've been giving you advice in executive session, but I'm happy to answer that question. I just want to make sure that's the wish of the commission.
Sure, I'm not asking for advice, just simple question.
Do other commissioners have thoughts on this?
Could that be handled offline? Does that need to be discussed in a public meeting? If Mr. Herrera has a question, as long as we don't have a quorum to discuss that with legal counsel, it would seem it's something he could discuss directly with Mr. Canfield.
Yeah, I don't see an issue for us having to go into executive session. I mean, we try to avoid it when we can, and this isn't an executive session.
But Madam Chair, Commissioner Herrera, why don't I suggest, unless the commission as a whole wants more information in open session, why don't you just talk to me and I'm happy.
We can handle that simple question offline, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So nothing else on agenda item 7 then? So we want to take a quick break? Okay, 2 minutes, I'm being told. Quick recess, the time is 5:45 p.m. We're back into public session now. The time is 5:49 p.m. And the next item on the agenda is call for public comment. And I've got a number of request to speak forms. And we'll start with Wes Harris, representing Self from Phoenix, Maricopa.
Madam Chair, before we start, can we limit the time to 4 minutes?
Yeah, we can limit time to 4 minutes. Do we have a timer? Okay, great. So if you could spell your name for the court reporter.
My name is Wes Harris. I'm Harris. I live in central North Phoenix. I hope that this session was productive to you, because I can't imagine you're a lot better than I am. I couldn't sit through this as a commissioner. I serve on the Commission for Water, the city of Phoenix. I would go nuts if I had to deal with what you guys have been doing today. Looking at the guidelines, Redistricting 101, this is my 5th meeting, by the way. There are 6 criterion. 1, you must comply with the U.S. Constitution and the voting rights. 2, equal population, these being the most important. C is compact and contiguous. D is respect communities of interest. E is use visible geographic features, cities, towns, counties, borders, and undivided census tracts. And F, create competitive districts where there is no significant detriment to the other goals. What I've heard is more about the voters' rights and competitive districts than any of the others. And somehow I think that's wrong. Under the voters' rights, as I understand it, and that's not real clear because you haven't issued anything on it, we're required to not have any diminution of existing districts. And we're not obliged to create new ones. And I see gerrymandering going on here, trying to create new districts with greater minority interests. And my question is, what have we become? With our political correctness, we've moved us back to the 50s. Now you people, most of you are not old enough to have lived through segregation. I am. Now we're perpetuating our differences with voter separations. And I asked the Latino population if they truly want to be like separated like the Indians have been and are. I don't think so. I think we want to be more homogeneous than that. Now, this little tete-a-tete that was going on with the lawyer and Mr. Herrera, why are we so concerned about transparency? We're not very transparent with our dealings with the Attorney General. This is sitting very, very badly with the citizens. You're going to be judged on how you act there. And I just don't understand how you can take our tax dollars and fight our tax dollars by hiring an attorney with our money and fighting our elected official whom we pay with our tax dollars. This makes no sense to me. And there was a couple of things that came up during this morning, the early part of the session about prisons. And what brought to mind, to my mind, was the issue of universities. We don't deal with the population of the university in a correct way, in my opinion. We have foreigners in our universities that are counted, I presume. We also have out-of-staters who are counted. It would seem to me that the suggestion that Mr. Camp made is that the university should be perhaps taken out of where they are physically located and allocated to the other districts. So because there's a improper effect on, say, Tempe. The university makes up the entire population, but that's a transient population. They're going to be there for 2 to 5 years. And I suggest that you do something about that. My time is up. I have a lot more things to say, but I'll yield.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Jane Friedman, representing Self from Maricopa.
You'll excuse me, I'm a little stiff from listening to this incredible meeting. Very illustrative, though, I might add. I'm aware that at the last IRC meeting, a letter was read by Commissioner Herrera, written by legislators, sent to the governor, and entered into the record. The letter is a wonderful example, I read it, by the way, a wonderful example of political speak and just plain gobbledygook. But those who sign the letter have an unshakable faith in their accusations, and many of us other people just see the letter as political belly bumping. The letter accurately, however, claims that the voters endorsed Proposition 106 in order to achieve a fair and independent process represented by this IRC. And once you galvanize the public trust, one of the first things you did, as if no one would perhaps notice or care, is you hired a company who was more expensive than any of the other bidders, not from Arizona, and we can see his struggling all over the place. Not a mapping company, and whose stated purpose in life is to elect progressive candidates. And you want us self-interested meanies to buy your fair and independent moniker? I don't think so. No more so than if you hired a company whose stated purpose was to only elect Republicans and had a track record like Strategic Telemetry for doing so. This is not the first time in history, you know, that a law or an amendment has been passed only for the people to realize that a great injustice has been perpetrated onto the well-meaning voters. The letter outlines alleged attempts at intimidation by people with inherent self-interests. You know, I can't even dignify that with a coherent and/or rational response. It defies logic, as feeling-type allegations do. Andy Biggs, Senate Majority Leader, as of August 22nd, 2011, stated in his letter to the governor that this commission had thus far ignored three statutory requests for information. Chairman Mathis and Commissioner Herrera then go on and announce their intended non-cooperation with Attorney General Tom Horne's investigation into this commission's practices. And this is open and transparent. Was a copy of the Senate Majority Leader Biggs' letter set out on the table next to the demagoguing letter of feeling legislators to the governor? If Mathis and Herrera are open and transparent as they claim, then why would they proceed to hire not one but two attorneys on the taxpayers' dime to defend themselves in this investigation? You all know about duck behavior. If it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's not a fair and independent duck. It's a cover duck. Either learn the meaning and spirit of Proposition 106 or quack yourself out of here, because we're not intimidating. We're holding you accountable.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ann Hines, representing Self from Maricopa.
Ann, A-N-N, Hines, H-E-I-N-S, Tempe. Let me see. I'm brand new to the political process, just getting involved since 2008, and so I'm not familiar with maps at all, so I apologize for any unsophisticated questions. Prop 6 I did study says that the voting history data should be excluded until the very end, only as a means of test compliance. So I don't understand why Wednesday's meeting was conducted primarily about the past voting record. So I'm confused about that. And to me, the hearing should be, it seems to be a point of education. And so I would like to be educated, or the audience educated. I also understand that the mathematical models, as I've been reviewing the information, are not those, all the models available. Why has strategic been more concerned with averages than comparison of past voting history? And then talking about past voting history, again, I have to reiterate what I said on Wednesday. If you can afford to spend $3 million, you have not two, but now three legal people, one lawyer, just to defend the three Democrats who refused to answer the questions. Why would you even consider today, which is new to me, that you wouldn't include the 2004 and 2006 census information? The council stated that she stated today, that we need electoral history for the past decade. So you have the money to hire to defend three people that refused to take the oath. I don't understand this. I apologize. Also, the format used by Strategic, the PPTX, is not a normal for the industry, and it can't be used on Macs, IBM, all the different equipment, what I don't understand, but I am being told that people cannot use this system. Is this because Strategic is new to mapping, or do we have a transparency problem with this? Lastly, the Supreme Court in 2009 ruled that the Voting Rights Act does not require governments to draw district lines if it has less than 50%. So we spent all day Wednesday on this and all day today on this. So I'm totally confused, and maybe you could educate the normal population on this. Also, the slides, when I reviewed them again, seem to concentrate on just 5 districts, and they seem very gerrymandered. And of course, today is different. You're doing more census tracking stuff. I would like to quote and submit to to the council the article from the Arizona Republic regarding Horns. It says, Horns Voting Right Act challenge important. In essence, the Voting Right Act requires racial gerrymandering. The Voting Right Act serves, this is the Republic, believe it or not, or for me, believe it or not, to require highly race-conscious politics based upon invidious assumption that only a member of a particular racial minority can properly represent that minority. Hence, it requires minorities be stuffed into political districts in which they constitute a majority to ensure that they can elect one of their own. And I am with Wes. I marched in the 60s against segregation. And I don't see the difference between racial gerrymandering and segregation. So I'm totally confused, and I'd love to have somebody talk about that. And again, the article goes on to say, many Arizonans would like to see more competitive legislative districts. It's tough to achieve when Latino voters have to be stuffed into majority-minority districts. And then it goes on to say, which I submit to you, that the state of Arizona has a decent chance of winning the lawsuit. In fact, I've looked at 4 different law firms' judgments, and they said it is unconstitutional, and it will be. So I do not understand why we're going through this, why we have to hire a professor in this situation. And then I would like to congratulate Strategic Telemetry that Mr. Ken Strasma was voted by the Political Insider poll as one of the top progressive Democrat political operatives, strategic and campaign consultants, and lobbyists. No wording about mapping, so I congratulate you on your position of being one of the very top progressive Democrat operatives, is the word. Oh, mover and shakers, they call it. Lastly, because we talked about Facebook, I went back to a system called Clute, which we use in the real estate industry to analyze people's websites. I would like you to know that the IRC has an F-. I would like you to know that Strategic Telemetry have an F-. And I went on a couple other sites that we use, and they didn't even know the name. And your, let me see, Strategic has 36 fans. They have no presence on YouTube, nothing in LinkedIn. And your competitor has 1,800 fans, thousands of videos, Twitter accounts, etc. So I just submit that because I got a little bit of a pushback from my comments about your brand new Facebook account, particularly since Commissioner McNulty, sorry, and Chair Mathis said that was the reason for voting for Strategic Telemetry. And I thank you for your time and for your hard work.
Thank you. Next speaker is Moher Sidwa. I don't see her. Okay. Karen Garrett from Scottsdale.
Karen, K-A-R-E-N, Garrett, G-A-R-R-E-T-T. I appreciate your time and efforts in this arduous, seems to be battle that you have ahead of you. I wanted to talk about the last meeting I came to. I didn't speak at that one, but I did make a couple comments at the one before that to say that I love CD5, and that was before the map came out, and now I'm in the very north end of CD5 and totally taken out of the valley, of which I have lived here for 30 years, and it's very painful for me to see the great volunteers that I've worked for. I was somewhat of a coordinator of volunteers for a congressional campaign, and we'll be saying goodbye to many close and dear people that are from Ahwatukee, and now I'm at the very bottom of a district that goes up to the top of the state and to the east of the state. Sorry for my emotion, it's just very difficult. I know some people have to change, but for me that's a huge change. Last meeting, I was worried about the hour that you spent on the contract amendment. I don't know much about this, but I felt like with the letter that was given that was referred to already, and Mr. Herrera's comments, that you should try not to, at all possible, to make the people that already feel bad enough about this process feel worse, and it didn't make me feel very bad. You reiterated comments once, and then you did it again and gave the same speech the second time, and it took a lot of time, and it was very emotionally disheartening to another population of people that you may not represent, but you should be careful to not be offensive in your position. And one of my big questions today is I've heard a lot about this prison situation. Today, for redistricting purposes, every state uses the population data the U.S. Census Bureau provides. Whether they realize it or not, that means they're accepting the census standards for deciding where people are counted. And the census counts people at their usual residence. It doesn't matter if their legal address is elsewhere. What matters is where they most often live and sleep. For inmates, of course, that's in prison. That is the law. That is why we use census records, and that is what we have to go by at this point. Whether we want it to change in the future, that's fine. But now we can't talk about what we wish it could be or what would be fair. We need to go with what we have. An argument can be made that the rules for prisoners shouldn't be any different from those for everyone else. After all, there are other groups of people, such as college students or nursing home residents, who often live somewhere other than their permanent legal address. Adjustments aren't made for those populations. The Census Bureau discovered a challenge when it studied the issue in 2006, figuring out where to count prisoners instead of a prison. States lack consistent records for prisoners, permanent home of record. The Bureau said this would mean that each prisoner would have to be contacted individually to make the change. Even then, there would be no guarantee that the prisoner would provide accurate or usable information. The Bureau said that process would cost $250 million, far more than it would cost just to simply count the prisoners. They didn't do anything about it. Not surprisingly, the Congress did not make the change. So we have what we have, and we need to use that and go forward with what we have. And I appreciate your time and effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Nancy Newman from LD 26.
I'm Nancy Newman, N-E-W-M-A-N. I live in Oro Valley, Arizona. That's north of Tucson, LD 26. I came to speak about the area that I live in, but instead I have to say and remind you that Arizona's in a recession, our country's in a recession. Arizona's really been hit hard. The average home price in Phoenix right now is $100,000. Can you imagine that? Times are tough out there, especially for small businesses. And here you guys are thinking about going over to Harvard, the brand name, to hire some professor because maybe he did a study. Harvard doesn't have that great of a pristine name. Maybe on the East Coast with everybody else in Washington, D.C., but it just doesn't ride necessarily out here. I understand why you chose him, but that's years ago. That doesn't really rate today. And also, why the state of Arizona has to come through and pay what is left over that the budget doesn't give you people. Why can't you set an amount that you will pay him and see if he'll accept it? Why do you have to leave an open-ended contract with anybody? We're in a recession. We, the people, are having to pay for this. You're here for us, but you guys, you forgot. We don't have any money in this state. Our state is bankrupt. The schools aren't getting the money. We had to cut our health care. But by George, let's go to Harvard, where we pick some questionable professor from a university that's lost its name and give him an open-ended budget? Are you kidding me? I'm sick. I'm sick in my stomach that you should still be thinking like this when we're in a recession, let me remind you, and Arizona's been hit hard, and the state did the very best they could to balance the budget, and they don't have any money left, and therefore the counties are cutting services. They're cutting hours. They're cutting everything because, let me repeat, there is no money in the state of Arizona. Please understand that. And if you run over budget, I just want you to remember that you will be taking away from our school systems, and you'll be taking away from the poor health, from access in this state. We don't have any money to spare, and please, please, please think about the money that you're spending to sit here and fiddle around with maps of people that I actually hope go to the polls and vote. I see the process is good, but I think you forgot that there's no money left in this country. It's gone. We're all just barely making it. Please don't make it any worse for us. Please think about where the money comes from. Honest Injun, it doesn't grow on trees. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Lynn St. Angelo, representing Self.
Lynn St. Angelo, ST period ANGELOLYNNE. This may be wrong, but I thought that Maptitude was going to be up online for the public to be able to try to make maps, and maybe it is, and I just don't know where it is, but I think that would be nice to know for someone just looking at the site that doesn't know what to do. I don't know where it is to be able to make maps from. The other question I had was the overlays that you're looking at right now pretty much have all been submitted by legislators and not just ordinary people, but I know there are a lot of maps evidently that have been submitted. So my question is, what about the ordinary people who've submitted maps? Do they have to put it in a format that can go up? And if so, what is that format? I think there are people who do maps who would like to know that and be able to submit it and also have it looked at as an overlay. The other thing that I noticed is that you have a book that has all the numbers from the public hearings that were compiled by Strategic Telemetry. But there's a lot of other public hearing type information that didn't come through the hearings. It came from the blue forms, it came from letters, emails, different things like that. But all might, as you're looking through that, that needs to be included and all added together. So that's the only area I know about is where I live. Oro Valley, Saddlebrook area that wants to stay together, that if there were 100 people who said that they wanted that, and there were 5 people that said they didn't want that, that you could actually look at it and see as you're reviewing the information. That I think it needs to come together, all of it together, not just the hearings, because people who talked about Oro Valley and Saddlebrook were at 4 different hearings in Tucson, different locations, different times, and then there's been other things submitted, I think, as well. So unless you put all that information together in one form of data, you can't possibly get an idea of how many members of the public are asking for one thing or another thing. And so that is my only comment. I think that as you're reviewing the data to determine how to take care of the public input, that you have the input in a format that you can actually look at it and say, oh, this is what the majority of people wanted. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Jim March, I think he's not here. And Steve Miratore is the last one. Oh, no, there he is.
Madam Chairman, Commissioners, thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of very brief points. Number one, Ms. Friedman cited Andy Biggs' August 23rd op-ed, which the only place I've seen that posted is Sonoran Alliance, but Ms. Friedman should be reminded that prior to, 3 or 4 days prior to the publication of Mr. Biggs' op-ed, the Commission honored the request that he claimed in that op-ed had not been responded to 3 times. So that's an important point. Also, I wanted to mention for Ms. Hines' benefit that the PPTX file format, I understand, is PowerPoint, and that if you don't have Microsoft Office on your computer, you can get OpenOffice. It's an excellent software available for free. Just Google OpenOffice, and you can look at PowerPoint files. That's all I have.
Senator Biggs' office and said, what are you doing when you're asking for information? 3 times you have the audacity to ask them for information. You're not even using the information. And they said they have already told Mr. Herrera that he had been out of the office for 2 weeks on vacation.
Thank you. I think that's it, unless there's anybody I missed that wanted to speak. Okay, that brings us to the end of the agenda, and so the time is now 6:17 p.m. and the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.